doesn't podcasts.
Okay. I'm not mad about it at all, but I am trying to remember what he said.
Rob Banks.
I remember the tone. Rob Banks, sure.
Oh.
I mean, I think I told you I had to be honest with you.
I demanded radical honesty.
I don't think we're going to redo it.
No, we're not.
But I don't think that's the best. But then again, it's not like a movie about scintillating dialogue, so I understand.
Do you want to hear some alts?
Sure.
We're not retaking it.
Right.
I'm just letting you see what could have been. Okay, but that is canon. What I just did is canon, and these are just some alternate drafts. The podcast just makes everything worse. Now, accurate.
The money.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and accurate. Right.
This is the thing. Almost every one of these quotes, I'm just going to be replacing the word money with podcast.
Yeah, that's about it. I'm looking at the quotes and
I thought it was from God. Who else would have that kind of podcast? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't track.
No.
I thought it was from podcast. Who else would have that kind of money? That's kind of funny. It's like a joke about the podcast industry.
Well, sure. I thought it was from Spotify. Who else would have that kind of money? You'd have to that's what you'd have to do. What was the other one here? I need a wee. I don't know how you change I need a wee. I would argue that's the best line in the movie.
Yeah. You did fine. The tagline is, can anyone be truly good? That was the tagline of this movie.
Well, but there's another tagline to this movie, and it's a tagline that our guest ripped into aggressively, and we will talk about this in a second. The other tagline on this poster, David, of course, is a new film from the imagination of Danny Boyle.
Right. Okay. And what's the beef with that? Apart from, what's the beef with that?
I don't want to speak for you, Adam. I don't know how you feel about this today, but your defense, your argument at the time was, why is Danny Boyle presenting himself as if he's Tim Burton?
Well, that, in retrospect, or having rewatched the film, that feels appropriate, doesn't it?
I think so.
I think so too, yeah.
Because Tim Burton is all over this film.
Yes.
It feels very much, among other types of films and filmmakers that he's throwing into this mix, it definitely feels a lot like Edward Scissorhands, but without any real commentary or satiric bite, which is fine. And I'm sure we'll get into that more. But yeah, Burton's all over this film, so I understand why they were trying to sell it that way.
The irony is, if Tim Burton made this movie tomorrow, we would all be doing cartwheels. We would be so fucking ecstatic if this was the filmmaker he had become.
If Tim Burton made this movie tomorrow, it would be nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. That's how excited people would just be. It might win. It might win. I mean, people might be like, why'd you set it in the Britain left the EU? Like, there might be some notes now if you made this
odd
movie,
alternate past. Yeah.
Right. But I think, yes. If a filmmaker who was sort of like a Burton-esque, like, oh God, he lost his touch with humanity, made this, there would be a lot of excitement. Yes.
Right. And I think when people are depressed about who Tim Burton has become, it's because they hoped he would be able to evolve into something like, I don't know, if not like this, something else. Here's a crazy stat I didn't realize, because, this is this period we've talked about a lot where Danny Boyle's like trying on a bunch of different genres. This is his real experimentation period, trying to see how we can use genre as a delivery system for different ideas. This is not only his only children's film, this is his only movie that is not rated R.
Yes. Is that surprising, really?
He doesn't have a PG-13.
No, he does not. I think but here's the thing. What could that possibly? Yesterday, I guess.
Slumdog.
Slumdog, but Slumdog has lots of violence in it. Like it's
Wait, is Yesterday
kind of a
PG-13?
gangster movie?
Is this
Yesterday
stat I
may
saw
have
pre-yesterday?
this.
Yeah,
this stat must be pre, because there's no way Yesterday was rated R, right?
Yesterday is rated PG-13. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
okay. So he finally
Yesterday should have been rated X. But
yeah, Yesterday should have been rated.
I'd like to see that one.
Wear a hazmat suit.
Yes. Radioactive.
This thing's a bomb. It's radioactive.
Listen, this is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
It's a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. and sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they bounce. Baby, this is a mini-series, as you may have picked up on, about the films of Danny Boyle. We're calling it Trainspodcasting. Today we are talking about Millions.
Millions!
His 2004, 2005, depending on which country you were in. It was released in different years. Children's fable.
Yes, it is. But it's also like a, sort of quasi remake of Shallow Grave with kids. That's also what it is.
Yes, it is.
Kids and Saints.
He loves his big bag of money.
He loves a bag of money. It's very Hitchcockian of him. He just, what's going to get plot moving?
Scary guys who show up after the bag of money is dropped.
Trainspotting's got the whole last act about like the sort of sports bag, the gym bag full of money. He loves that.
Sure does.
It's just a plunk, dropping a big old stack of bills.
So Millions is a PG, huh? In America. It's a 12 in England. Which I think is appropriate because this movie is it's a little frightening. It's a little intense. I think if I was like 6 or 7, I would have been a little spooked by this movie. Yeah.
No, he gives it some genuine menace. Now, our guest today, returning to the show, second appearance, first time solo, co-host of the Filmspotting podcast, which was previously the Cinecast when it launched in 2005. David, sometimes people will say, you guys are lucky you got in on podcasting early. When we started our show 10 years later.
Yeah.
A full decade later.
You launched when like listening to a podcast was that you had to listen to it on your iPod.
That's right.
Exclusively. It was purely a podcast.
Which I did, yeah.
And you weren't even able to go to iTunes yet. They hadn't launched podcasting. You had to go to these different podcasting websites to download shows and then sync them up with your iPod.
Wow.
Right.
You had to plug in an RSS.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my God.
And you had to make sure you were downloading episodes specifically onto the pod before you left your home.
That's right.
Yeah, no, right. You had to do your morning download. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as it turned out, we in fact launched around the same time this movie came out because episode 2.
Episode 2.
Yeah. The second episode, the second movie we ever discussed on the show was Millions.
Of what was the Cinecast. Yes. Now Filmspotting. Adam Kempenaar returning to the show. So Adam, I listened to episode 2, which I had never heard before. I think I started listening to the show around 2010 or 2011. And recently you guys just offered up your entire archive for the first time. You have a supporting cast membership with them that is very much worth your money if you're a Filmspotting fan because it's 15 years worth of episodes. But I had not listened to episode 2 before, which runs a brisk 29 minutes in total.
That's right.
Which back then, that people were like, ugh, these episodes are so bloated.
The most self-indulgent.
Yeah, that was kind of part of it. On episode 1, we talked about Be Cool.
Yes.
And Sam, my co-host, now producer of Filmspotting, we said at the time, the show is only going to be 20 or 25 minutes. And that's what it's going to be every week. 20 or 25 minutes. In and out. People are just going to get their movie talk fix or whatever. And that first episode ended up being like 45 minutes somehow. And we were actually apologetic about it, which is ironic here talking with you gentlemen as well, right? Looking back on that. And so I think we deliberately tried to pick up the pace a little bit with episode 2. And so under 30 minutes, we got Sam's story about meeting Alan Ball and lying to him. We reviewed Millions, and we did the top 5 movies we're most embarrassed to admit we've never seen. Any one of those things now would take at least 30 to 60 minutes on our show.
In and of itself.
I can't believe it.
In and of itself. No, you were done with your Millions review before the 10-minute mark of the episode.
That's right.
And then you start your top 5 with 9 minutes left. And that includes having to do like theme song, intro, outro on either side of those things. The first time I met you, Adam, because you and Josh, whenever you're traveling, will sometimes do Filmspotting meetups to pick a bar and try to create a centralized place for listeners to hang out. And JD Amato, friend of the podcast, constant guest, was the one who turned me on to Filmspotting because he's a Chicago guy. I think he first listened to it on the radio.
I think so, yeah.
And so we went to the meetup. I mean, this was right when we had started our show. So this was
16 or 17, early.
Yeah, 7 years ago. And you were telling JD and I that internally you guys had been debating whether to split the weekly movie review and the theme top 5 list into 2 separate shows because you were worried that the show was getting too long per episode.
Yeah.
And in fact, maybe one episode could not sustain both segments. And it used to all happen in 29 minutes.
Yeah, it's crazy. And actually talking to you and then starting to listen to your show, even though we don't go as long as you usually, it made me realize that...
Don't rub it in.
No, it's a good thing. If your audience likes what you're doing and you're giving them, I hate to say it, decent content, then they're not gonna start getting bored. They're not gonna tune out just because all of a sudden they've hit a certain mark. If they like the show, if they like the hosts, they'll listen. At least that's what seems to be happening.
Sure, but they're also disgusting pigs.
Yeah.
They're revolting creatures.
Yeah, they should all shut up, and this episode's going to be 25 minutes long, and that's the pattern going forward. We'll do commentaries, Griff, on Patreon.
Yeah.
But we'll just hit stop at 25 minutes. We'll be like, all right, that's all you get. Whatever.
You're not even saying 4x speed. You're saying just you only get the first 30 minutes of a movie.
It would be funny if we watched movies that.
Yes. Yeah, and tried to talk that fast.
We would hit like the 15-minute mark. If you listen to some of those early episodes, we would get about 15 minutes into a review, and I would say something like, well, we've got more to say, but we should probably cut it off here. It was almost as if I had this internal clock saying, well, no one's going to listen to this for more than 15 minutes, so you got to just shut up and move on. And, well, we've all changed with the times.
Adam, Ben just started salivating at the notion of one of us saying that.
Oh my God. Yeah, truly. That would be a blessing. Can I ask a question about the coming up with the name? Because you were at a time where you probably could have picked the movie podcast, like as your name. I mean, like as far as real estate goes, you had your picking. You had your pick.
Yes.
You could have maybe even been the podcast. You could have just called
the
yourself.
podcast. I like it. I don't remember where Cinecast came from. If you go back and look, all those early shows, they felt like they had to have podcast in it somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So cast was very common. And we had Cinecast in about maybe 60 or 70 episodes in. So into that first year of Cinecast, we got a cease and desist letter from a company called Cinecast.
Was it a podcast company?
No, they weren't. But they made a product that was related to theatrical distribution somehow. I think they were the company that made the technology that did the ad shows before movies.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, fortunately, I went to college. One of my roommates became a lawyer. So I had someone I could get advice from. And at the time, he was like, we could probably fight this because we're not sure there's reasonably any confusion here. Or we could argue that there's not going to be any confusion between your two ventures. But then he said something really smart. And I guess this will be advice to any young podcasters or aspiring podcasters out there. He said, but you know what? You should take this opportunity to come up with a new name anyway that nobody else has used, that is unique to you, and that you guys can trademark.
Yeah.
To Sam and I, it was like, we're gonna have to give up Cinecast, but that's who we are. It's the greatest name ever. It's the greatest movie podcast name ever. We're never changing it. But we took that to heart, and we embarked on a search, a lot of conversations about what our new show title would be. And I'll conclude by telling you that we went so far, speaking of really generic bad names, we went so far as to announce at one point that the new name of Cinecast was going to be The Cinema Show.
But that's what Ben's saying.
It's clear. You know what it's about.
Right, yeah.
I know. But we got so much pushback from our audience about how terrible it was that we said, okay, we take it back. Everything's back on the table. And then a listener sent in Filmspotting, a student, I think he was at Florida State, and he said, what about Filmspotting? And we went, yeah, Danny Boyle's cool. Right. Wow. We like Trainspotting. It wasn't an homage to him explicitly. That wasn't the point of it. But it worked, and we said, okay, we'll be Filmspotting.
Yeah, I didn't even put that together. Of course, it's sort of a Trainspotting reference.
It definitely is. Boyle, when I interviewed him the first time, made a joke about it when he heard the name of our show. Like, don't you owe me something? Don't you owe me some cash?
No, and you said, no, I owe Irvin Welsh something.
That's right.
Danny. You didn't come up with that name. It's just, I just like the idea of being there like that early. That, like Ben says, you could just be called Film Pie. There's like Off Menu, my favorite new podcast. Do you know Off Menu?
No, I don't think so.
British comedians talking to other British comedians about their favorite food. One point, Bob Mortimer, his episode, he says like, well, you know, I'm pre-yogurt. Like, there wasn't yogurt when I was a kid. Like that, I was alive when that got introduced. Like when they were like, check this out, this new product, yogurt. I think about that. That's what you guys were. You guys were like,
you're pre-yogurt.
So early in podcasting.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Filmspotting connection, the title connection was one thing, and then I remembered that Millions had some important place in the lore of Filmspotting, in the development, in the birth. But we've been trying to do. We still have failed to do the in-person episode. This is over Zoom. But you guys were supposed to come to New York to do your anniversary show in 2020. We had an episode scheduled on the books. Then we, of course, did Romancing the Stone with you and Josh Larson over Zoom during Deepest, Darkest Pandemic. And then you finally got to do your New York show about a month ago, but both your schedules end up being too wild and the turnaround time too quick. So we will have Josh on at a second time because 5 people on a Zoom tends to make brains explode. But we definitely want to have you on for this, especially because I feel like you have, not having heard the Millions episode until today, but I feel like I heard it invoked so many times as like what you were talking about, the episode where you put the pressure on yourselves of like, we got to keep this thing tight. We got to limit our thoughts as much as possible. And you and Sam Van Halgeren, who was your co-host at the time, still producer of the show, were like fairly dismissive of the movie.
We were.
But in a pretty quick, rushed way, like a kind of hand wave kind of way. And I feel like you'll talk about this as like, we maybe never gave Millions a full shake. I don't know where you stand on it today, but it was impossible listening to the episode to imagine you not digging into this movie more deeply.
That was my takeaway listening to that review as well. I felt like I had to go back and hear what my thoughts were then. I rewatched the movie first, of course, so I could have completely new, fresh thoughts, and then I could see how they lined up, and I could try to reconcile those a little bit. And there's no doubt, if we talked about this movie today, look, 18 years, almost 18 years since that review, there's a reason why I had very mixed feelings about putting the entire archive online and making it available. People can go back and listen to those shows. I haven't listened to that show since I recorded it and edited it in March 2005. And I don't particularly want to go back and listen to even the shows I did last week or a month ago or a year ago, but especially those early shows. That was almost 18 years ago, and I'd like to think I've become a better talker about movies and a better podcaster. I'd also like to think I've become a better watcher of movies in that time and over the course of doing 1,000 episodes or so. Also, though, you're seeing the movie for the second time. And even if you haven't seen it in 18 years, you're obviously able to pay more specific attention to choices that are being made because you're not caught up in or maybe distracted by the narrative and what is or isn't making sense. And there are elements of this movie I think we'll probably dive into that maybe don't always make total sense or that you're questioning. So I watched it the second time, had my new reaction to the film, and then I went back and listened to that 10-minute profound conversation on Cinecast number 2. And the long and the short of it is we were a little bit too hard on the movie. I think the allegation of cynicism on Danny Boyle's part, which is an allegation we made at the time, was probably going too far. I think his heart is absolutely in the right place with this film. But the bottom line is I ended up having the exact same overall experience, which is I was mostly enjoying the film. And I think the last 20 minutes or so are catastrophically bad.
Interesting. I had a real roller coaster experience watching this. I saw this. I took my sister to see this. and she would have been
really small,
7
right?
at the time.
Yeah.
When this came out, so she was even younger than the two characters. But like, I was in high school taking my much younger sister to see this movie, seeing it with her. I think it was kind of exciting anytime there was sort of like an elevated kids movie like this, tourist kids movie. Because I would take my sister to see anything that was appropriate for her to see. I like going to see movies. It was a bonding thing for two of us. But anytime there was like, oh, there's a kids movie playing at the Sunshine, I can take you to. Right. That felt kind of cool. And it was like exciting that he was doing this. David, you and I talk so much about like liking our auteurs to like do one of each kind of movie. You have to make a space movie at some point. You have to make a period epic. You have to make a this. You have to make a that. The kids movie, I think, is a thing that a lot of serious filmmakers feel above doing. And those who figure out how to do it well and in their style, it's kind of a really special thing. And so I remember being really excited for this and then walking out and feeling a little deflated without thinking it was bad. And then in like the 18 years since, I mostly just think back on that as like being like, oh, that movie's fine, but it's kind of like, a little bit of a deflated balloon. It's like charming enough. It's sweet. It didn't really work.
And then
like every 10 minutes watching this, I would oscillate between being like, this thing's great and feeling kind of exhausted by it.
That's fair.
Well, that's the Danny Boyle experience a little bit.
Being super charmed or feeling like sugar poisoning or whatever. And I think I evened out on like maybe respecting it a little more than I did at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's got some like, I mean, the good elements of this movie I think are incredibly good. And I think the biggest thing watching it in the present day is I have more appreciation for it just because it feels kind of unfathomable for someone to make this today.
Yeah. Or certainly make it with as many bold choices, not surprisingly, that Boyle makes. I mean, this movie could be made by any number of filmmakers. You could take the exact same storyline. Chris Columbus could make this movie, and it would be the most saccharine, pedestrian, but probably uplifting movie that would send people out of the theater feeling great. That anyone's ever. It could be that experience, and it's not, and it's on the whole maybe a little bit unsatisfying. But the highs, I think you're right. Some of the highs really are high. They're really good, and I didn't fully appreciate them back in 2005 the way I did watching it a little closer now. And there's another element that I got just completely wrong. I can listen back to and say, well, that's the experience I had in 2005, but I think I was just genuinely wrong about it, which is I thought that the way Boyle depicted that neighborhood estate, it was a little bit snarky and a little bit cynical itself, as in, it's so gorgeously rendered and everything's so perfect, but also he likes to kind of show you the power lines behind everything, just muddying up the view a little bit. And it's so about conformity, it felt, that I thought he was applying some commentary to that and kind of making us think that he's having a bit of a laugh at this type of living, at people who aspire to live in these types of places. I watched that again now and I realize I think I was applying my own sense of, oh, it's a simulacrum of the perfect life. Boyle doesn't portray it that way at all. I think he's genuine about this being this step up from where they were, that we are all aspirational, I suppose, in that way. We want a quote unquote better life. And I don't think he's dogging or he's trying to critique in any way the people who live in that environment. I was just wrong about that.
David, had you seen this when it came out?
So I did not see this. Came out when I was in college in England, and I think I was like disdainful of the very idea of it. Mm-hmm. In this kind of like, why is Danny Boyle making a kids movie? And then the reviews were tepid, or whatever they were, right? I mean, the reviews were sort of shrugged like, and so I avoided it in cinemas. But then my brother, who is younger than me, saw it in theaters and was like, Millions is good. Like, check out Millions. My brother has always stanned this movie. And I did, and I liked it. but I think I still was a bit too much of a cynical college student-y guy to really lock into this movie unabashedly, especially because it was Danny Boyle. I was still like this sort of, I had the hangover of being like an Empire magazine reader, and I was just like, why isn't he making a cool movie? Like, sure, you okay, fine, you proved some sort of a point here. Like, you can make a kid's movie and still have it be interesting, right? Like, they're like, I think I was projecting on this movie too. It is funny how a movie about a nice boy who gets money and wants to help people, we're all just kind of like, what's this movie's game? Come on, what is it trying to tell me?
How dare they?
Like, what's all this sincerity? I don't understand. And now I rewatch it and I'm just like, yeah, I think it's a very good movie.
This kid stinks.
Ben,
he stinks.
You don't like him? He's not
doing the right thing. Come on, morality.
Wait, what would the right thing be?
Okay, Ben, what would you do?
You think he should just he should blank check it up? He should buy like 10 TVs and
Mr. McIntosh.
So Ben's pizzas. The brother. Ben's the brother, basically.
Oh, absolutely. I'm buying an apartment. 100%.
An apartment? You're really swinging there.
That's what he goes and does in the movie at one point. He goes and he's, checking out what he can do with his money. Yeah, absolutely. No, listen, this is like one of those classic things where I watch this and I'm like, I would have done everything different. It all would have worked out. Yeah. I would have made actually more money. I would have invested and been set for life if that had happened to me.
Oh, you would have invested well. Sure. In 2005 too. No trouble on the horizon there economically.
No. Ben, I have a hard time believing you would have been responsible with the money. I believe you would have had a good time.
Yeah, you probably would have seen me wheeling like a wheelbarrow full of cigarette packs.
You would have been like the brother, hired out your friends to be Secret Service agents.
Yeah. You definitely would have, yes. You would have hired some guys.
I would have had a golden slingshot. No, it just is upsetting to watch this because I understand he's saying like this is not right, but I don't know. Maybe it's just the rebel in me, but I'm like, this is truly like money that you should be taking. You should not be giving it away. It would have gotten burned. Like, I'm totally with the dad. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts?
Look, because we're doing Danny Boyle, we've talked about this scenario multiple times now. And I think if I found a bag of money, it would be a no from me. It would be hello, I found a bag of money. Can someone come collect it from me? I think I would immediately be too stressed out.
I don't know. I always land on that side, David, every time we've talked about a big bag of money movie. Yeah. Like Simple Plan stresses me out so much. This is the one movie where I'm like, maybe keep it.
Maybe keep it?
Yeah, I don't know. It fell off a train.
It fell. The falling off, you're right. That does feel like Providence more than, there's like a dead body next to this.
Yes, and that's the key.
That's alarming. Yeah,
what has the government ever done for you? Okay, do you know what I'm saying?
This isn't a government thing. It's more I'm worried someone wants this, and that person is unscrupulous. Like, that would always be my fear.
That is one way, though. The choice is very different from those other scenarios, right? Where this boy is a boy, and he's genuinely naive and innocent, and he has no sense that there's any nefariousness attached to this money. And because of his imagination and these flights of fancy and the people he randomly sees appear, he thinks God really did send him
genuinely believes
a bunch of money. So for at least a good chunk of the movie, he's not making a choice. He doesn't have to think in those terms, right?
Right. Yeah, no, but it is true. Most of the other big bag of money movies, the setup is always you find it next to a dead person, right? Like No Country and Shallow Grave, Simple Plan. There's a body and a bag. And the question is, do you take it or not? And it's like, pretty bad omen that someone died trying to get away with this money.
Right.
It doesn't pretend well for you. But this kid's in a cardboard box. He's having a grand old time. Big bag of money, flies out of the sky, lands on his head, bunks him. If anything, he's owed that money for the injury. He got bunked in the noggin.
true. I guess you could call British Rail and be like, "Hi, a bag hit me in the head."
His beautiful
and then
fort
you just wouldn't say bag of money. You would just say
beautiful
bag.
fort crushed. Those things don't just grow on trees. He has to build a new one. He has to buy new masking tape. That takes money.
Sure.
Money that is in a bag that hit him on the head.
Well, you see, maybe you do some creative accounting here where you're like, I itemized everything in the fort, expenses, about $200,000. So I'll just keep this. It's called a wash.
It was about six different boxes taped together. I don't know if you saw the dimensions on that thing. David, you're a daddy.
True.
Daddy David.
Yes.
But I'm going to be parental here.
What?
We got to have the talk.
What?
It's a 3-letter word.
Okay.
It ends with X.
Okay, I can think of one.
No, you
what?
Potty brain.
Oh, no.
Not that one. I'm talking about a tux. A tuxedo.
Tuxedo.
Mm-hmm.
What's the etymology of that word? What a great word.
I don't know. It's an unbelievable word. Look, when you need a tux, the best place to go get one is the black tux. Now, I'll say this. I'll say it, David. I saw some listeners getting snarky in the blank check Reddit.
All these fancy pants advertising their tuxedo company.
Do they think this is really the target audience, right? Hey, Black Tux doesn't just sell fancy tuxedos. They sell all kinds of suits. This is what you need if you're going to a wedding,
Yes,
if you got a graduation.
For a formal occasion.
This is the whole point. We are telling you, we know, blank check listeners, that you're not dressing fancy on a regular basis.
We are,
we know
but you don't have to be.
But maybe you have a one-off event, and you don't want to buy a suit just for this one event.
You don't want to drop hundreds and hundreds of dollars on something. Why don't you rent a suit?
You don't want something off the rack
or
that's barely going to fit you. This is the thing. Black Tux is going to make sure you look sharp.
You take the Black Tux Fit quiz. You pick the style you want to rock, and boom, Tux is delivered to your door 10 days before the day you need it. That's
easy.
Plenty of time to try it on and make sure it wears you well.
It's easy, and then when it's done, they send you the shipping materials to send it right back to them.
If the fit's not quite right, they got a Black Tux Fit guarantee. You can order a better size within a day or two, and they'll send another one right away.
Their turnaround times are
extra cost.
So fast. Yes.
If you want an in-store experience, they've got showrooms around the country.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We are using Black Tux.
Absolutely, for our live show.
For our live show
Brooklyn
coming up
Opera House.
Because we're going to fancy it up.
We're going as fancy as we can.
I took the size quiz.
Yes.
It's easy.
I took the size quiz, and the result I got was good. They went good size.
And you've used Black Tux before?
I have. For at least 2 weddings where I have been groomsmen.
Mm-hmm.
A groomsman.
A groomsman.
One of them, dare I say, a best man.
Wow.
It made it so easy because my friends who were getting married were just able to set it and go, hey, this is the suit that everyone wears.
Bam.
You know, if you're organizing a wedding or something like that, you pick the style, everyone just goes, they submit their sizes, it gets shipped to them. You know no one's going to mess up.
Now, I'm going to call to action.
Please, I insist.
Rent or buy. The Black Tux is the best place to go when you need a tuxedo for a wedding or special night. And right now, when you go to theblackTux.com/check and use code CHECK, you'll save $20 off your order. That's THEBLACKTUX.com/check, code CHECK to save $20. TheblackTux.com/check, code CHECK. TheblackTux.com.
Could not have said it any more clearly myself.
Thank you. I remember thinking this movie was more explicitly about like the changeover of currencies, right? That there would be some, and obviously that is the idea, is that they have to spend it fast.
Yeah, I had completely forgotten that element.
Me too.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Well, it was such a big deal when this movie came out because that was such a topic of constant fucking unending debate in Britain when I lived there. Mm-hmm. Will we ever change to the euro? Not in my country. None of these euro dollar. I don't want to touch that kind of money. The Queen must be on my money. Blah blah blah. But it really is just Boyle, and I mean it's a new screenwriter, but Boyle returning to like his favorite topic of the sort of you're presented with a moral/immoral choice. What do you do? And for the first time, he's putting it in the hands of like a cherubic little boy with freckles on his cheeks, who lost his mother and wants to make people happy. And I think that's nice, Ben.
This kid's exhausting with all this saint business.
Ben, you're related to a saint.
That's true. I forgot.
I do love the dad energy you're bringing to this. You're like, I'm owed this. I'm taking it.
This is the kind of thing in life that never happens. And you should with open arms accept it and say thank you and spend that damn money.
It is such a funny Danny Boyle balance where you're like, the fact that it truly falls out of the sky, you're like, there is the element that feels like magical in this movie, and then it's cut with a villain character who feels like he could be out of Trainspotting, who is not pitched to a children's film at all. An aspect that I kind of admire, that he's genuinely scary. And he's so scary that it almost feels like he might be a hallucination as well. There was a part of the movie where I started tracking, has anyone else actually seen this guy? I had forgotten that the other brother sees him in the first meeting. Because basically every other time this guy corners the main kid, it's in isolation.
Yeah. He's at the school. He's in the hallway. Nobody notices him, right?
Right.
The attic, even later. Honestly,
Yes.
The first time I watched it, and even rewatching it a little bit, there was a part of me that thought, there's no way we're supposed to believe he was really in the attic. This is some kind of vision that he's having. But no, he's really in the attic.
And even at Selfridge's, he just kind of shows up and then disappears just as quickly. But it does feel like, is this guy just as tangible as the Saints are?
That's how he appears to him the first time, right? He comes over, he appears the same way all the other Saints do. And you can tell that Damien's confused that first time, whether or not he's really there.
Right. Now, mind you, the older brother also sees, getting ahead in the plot, their mother when she reappears. So, like, this movie does put forward that these two things might be equally real.
Sure. Yeah. I like the sort of childlike, blurry line between imagination and reality thing. I think that's fun.
Isn't it funny though how he does portray the villain as scary, certainly scarier than the Home Alone bad guys, though I was thinking about them too while I was watching this, but he doesn't ever cross that threshold where he really seems evil, or he seems like there's imminent danger facing them.
Sure.
He doesn't threaten them in a way that this guy in real life, I'll say, really would. Even the whole thing about the money at the end, it's sort of like, I'm going to call you on the phone and then you're going to deliver the money to my door. If this guy's really the badass he kind of carries himself as, he'd just come into the house and grab the money, right? He's not worried about the dad or these other people. But they don't cross that line.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think it's because they didn't want to. My sense of it is they wanted him to be scarier than the Home Alone bad guys. Boyle needed some authenticity, if you will, that way. He wanted to add that element, but he also didn't want it to cross over into Shallow Grave or rated R territory. He wanted kids to still feel okay.
That's the thing. If you ever project the sense that this guy murdering the kid is on the table, the movie becomes unwatchable.
It does.
If you ever get the vibe that guy has it in him, which I don't think you do feel that way. I think you feel like this is a dangerous guy who is doing everything he can to intimidate this child, but that is maybe a line he wouldn't cross in actuality.
He's not like a professional criminal, right? Because the storyline of how this robbery went down, like these are just regular blue collar guys that decide to steal this money.
Yeah, it's the thing I like about this movie too, is that when you get the explanation of where the money came from, it does feel like that could be its own heist movie.
Totally.
It feels like a British countryside Logan Lucky or something.
Question about Home Alone, about the wet and or sticky bandits. I know they rebrand. They discuss killing him, right? Like, I feel like they do have more
They might.
outward malevolence, even though they are also like, cartoon animals that get bonked in the head, right? Like, I feel like there's one point at which they discuss like shooting him. Is that, maybe I'm making that up. Maybe they never get that intense.
No. I think that's the weird balance. If the guys act like cartoon characters, then they're allowed to say, I'm going to kill that kid, because it doesn't feel real.
Yep.
Whereas if you hire the guy in this movie and tell him to give a real performance, then he cannot imply that he would kill the kid. Like, the Wet Bandits want to kill Kevin McAllister in the same way that, like, Wile E. Coyote wants to catch the Roadrunner.
Right. But yeah, he's scary in that kid way. Adults are scary, Yeah. And yeah, especially adults you don't know. who are asking you kind of vague questions, and like, he works. His name, he's the poor man, right? Like that's the credit he gets. Yeah, it's kind of a cool credit, actually. Christopher Fulford is the name of the actor.
David, you were sort of starting to get into this, but E-Day, an entirely fictional thing, correct?
A fictional thing but
nothing even
it's
close
one that
to
happened.
this ever happened.
Well, England never entered the Euro and never came close. But obviously, when I was a kid, most of Europe did enter the Euro, and they did have, a day like this. I mean, it would be a thing where it was a very long, extended window of two currencies, though. I don't think it would ever be as drastic as this movie makes it seem.
Sure.
Where it's like, spend them if you got them, man. Like that's, like it was always, I think I even went to France or wherever, and you would, you could pay in both francs and euros for a while. It was like, but I guess there is always going to be a day where that's that, like where it's like, okay, the end, like we're switching to one.
I know the pushback on the Euro was happening like early, pretty much as soon as the idea was presented, it was pushed back. At the time this movie was written, did they think this was going to happen? Or did this almost feel like a satirical thing to project that?
No, because this movie was written in the mid-2000s during the Blair government, and the Blair government was ostensibly pro-Euro, was ostensibly like, they kind of did this, two-way thing of like, we're supportive of entering the Euro someday, but we would need many economic things to change for that to happen. And, it was kind of a kick the can thing, because it was always pretty obvious that British people, there was never going to probably be majority support for it. People can read about the economics of the Euro. People, Black Wednesday, people never got over Black Wednesday in the 90s. And I think that was, what scared. And then after the 2008 recession, that there was never any political support for entering the Euro. So this is before then. So there's probably like a little bit of a like fantasy of, well, maybe one day, right?
I feel like I saw somewhere though that Boyle said it was almost like, if we don't make this movie fast enough, then this will all be, it'll look all so silly. Because there was this idea that it was imminent somehow, or that the Euro was going to take over. And even though there would be tons of pushback, that would just happen at some point. I thought I read that comment from Boyle somewhere.
I'm sure, I'll dig into the dossier. I'm sure there were people who figured it was inevitable,
right?
Because the mainland had done it. And in many ways, look, I mean, my politics on this are sort of agnostic. At the time, I was pro-Euro because it just seemed good. Mm-hmm. And now I just know that's sort of like not a thing anymore. But also, like, I remember being a kid and like going to Italy and, getting a, 10,000, lira note. And you're like, oh, what's this? And they're like, oh, no, it's like $1. And you'd be like, what? Once the Euro came about, the Euro is this very boring currency. Like the money is very boring looking. Mm-hmm. There's something about it that feels a little fake, but like, obviously it made life so much easier to visit Europe and use the Euro. I don't know.
I'll just throw in that one thing I did think about this time that I certainly didn't think about in 2005 is that obviously the whole Euro aspect of this is the thing that drives the plot forward, and the money. That's why it is fundamentally there. But it also does support Damien as a character and his mindset when we meet him, right? This idea, I believe that he probably has been obsessed with saints for some time before we meet him at the beginning of the film. I don't think he's already started to see saints. And so this combination, this confluence of things happening in his life, his mother has just died. How world-changing is that? Now we're moving to an entirely new neighborhood, leaving everything behind that I knew. Oh, and on top of it, money is no longer money. Everything about the world you inhabit, it could not have changed more in kind of a blink of an eye for this kid. So it isn't just this whimsical thing that it is that, oh, he sees Francis of Assisi. No, he's manifesting his grief. He's dealing with trauma and all of the things that are changing, all the uncertainty and chaos around him.
Yeah, and the fact that it's 3 years between him and his brother, the difference between 9 and 12 in this movie is huge, where not just how pragmatic the brother is and sort of, trying to approach the idea of this money like an adult. What's the responsible thing to do? What's the profitable thing to do? But even just him sort of like keeping his catalog of nipples on his computer, needing to like explain how the world works in black and white terms at all times, even just the like, do you not understand the implications of this woman being invited over to the house and dad laughing at her and all this sort of stuff. It's like the lead boy is sort of at the last age where he would still process all of these things in that way. What you're saying, Adam, right? Where he would look at all these things and come to a magical conclusion, where he would still need to use saints to process his emotions maybe in such a vivid way.
There's also just the childish, the sympathetic thing of like hearing these stories about saints and thinking them as sort of superheroes because those stories are so lurid and supernatural. Like, and so like that he's talking to like Saint Gonzaga, where like when you read that story of what happened to that guy, you're like, Jesus Christ, this is horrible.
Right.
But but to him, he can sort of filter it into this kind of, super heroic, vaguely exciting, vaguely frightening kind of idea.
Well, because also if you're a kid, people around you, and if you're a kid who grows up in the church, people around you are saying like, Spider-Man's not real. Put down that comic. By the way, this guy is real.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
They're pointing at like biblical stories. They're telling you tales of saints that all have these magical elements in them. Equally kind of inspiring and terrifying elements. And they're like, no, but this actually happened.
Yes. And I think like English people get spooked by religion. I don't mean to paint my other home country with a broad brush, but I do think that's true. Obviously, this boy's Catholic. These are, hence all the saints and all the gore. It's such a gory religion, and I say that with respect and fear of that religion. But I do think that must have made some viewers in Britain kind of uncomfortable, where they're like, "Oh, we don't get in for all that," like like this sort of like super sainty stuff. Like, but because it's a kid, you can forgive it in a way, like his kind of simplicity about it and his way of rendering everything sort of sweetly. Or maybe you're Ben and you think like this kid's a little twerp and you wish the train had like wiped him off the map. I don't know. Like maybe not. I love this little kid. I'm so pro this little kid, and I'm so touchy about kid actors often.
I think it's a pretty phenomenal performance. I mean, Adam, in your episode, you were saying, you were sort of complaining about the kid being like so perfectly precocious, but I think it's one of the most successful elements of this movie that this kid is so self-aware in his performance. He feels so unstudied. He feels so real and earnest. You genuinely believe that he believes everything he's saying. That I think anything about this kid that could feel contrite on paper, he sells so thoroughly. He makes it feel very natural and honest. And he's so funny. Just his way of being is funny.
He is. I think it is hard to play naive and innocent, or it's very easy to make naive and innocent be kind of silly and dumb and boring. And this kid isn't. I didn't feel that way. I am with you, Griffin, in that I constantly felt the authenticity of those moments that needed to be authentic, and that he didn't. Part of it is I don't think he overplays anything.
No,
there's a lot of emotion underscoring everything that's happening, and as I just said, there's real grief and real trauma behind it. He doesn't play any of that in the way that I don't think you should as an actor. It's there. If you do the lines, if you bring to it that authenticity and honesty, the screenplay and everything else around it will do the work for the audience. We don't need the actor to lean into that, and he doesn't.
Yeah, that having been said, I don't think it's like a Kuleshov effect thing, which can oftentimes happen with kids, where you're sort of treating them like trained animals.
Yeah, he's not a blank slate.
No, you feel the thoughts going on behind his eyes, but he's not playing any of that, as you said.
Yes.
David, let's crack open the dossier because I just want to find out how he found this fucking kid.
Right. Well, that's true. But also, of course, it begins with Frank Cottrell Boyce, the writer of this film, who had done lots of sort of British soap stuff, but I feel like is probably best known for his many, many collaborations with Michael Winterbottom.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of coming off of them working together multiple times. They did Welcome to Sarajevo. They did The Claim, which is a crazy movie. Have you seen The Claim, Adam?
I haven't.
Sort of a forgotten movie. It's like it takes the Mayor of Casterbridge, the Thomas Hardy novel, but like puts it in immigrant California gold mining country. It's with Wes Bentley and Sarah Polley and Peter Mullen, and it's like one of those movies where you're like, God, how did he get the money for this? Like, it's sort of like big, and it was a total flop.
Yeah.
But then they did 24-Hour Party People, which is a great film, maybe Michael Winterbottom's best movie, about the Manchester scene in the early 90s with Steve Coogan. And then they did Code 46, which is like a weird sci-fi movie with Tim Robbins and Samantha Morton. I was seeing all of these because I was very in on Winterbottom, and like these were just like cool British, art movies in the early 2000s.
Tristram Shandy too, right? Didn't he write Tristram Shandy?
Yes. I think that's the last movie he did with Winterbottom, and he also did other weird stuff like Hillary and Jackie and Revenger's Tragedy, which was like this insane comeback attempt by Alex Cox, the Repo Man guy with Eddie Izzard, and it's a really interesting movie. Anyway, he was the thing about him is like he also does not scream, I have a whimsical children's film in me. Like neither of them do. He's not finding some guy who's like, all right, here I am, a British children's laureate, maybe I'll give you something. They both clearly wanted to do something different.
Yeah, I mean, but you talk about like the cynicism you approach this movie with, David, is like, why is fucking Danny Boyle making a kids movie? The fact that Danny Boyle's movie before this is 28 Days Later, like his gnarliest movie, his like grimiest, sort of lo-fi film, and that I know there's Code 46 before it as well, but like Frank Cottrell Boyce is coming off of 24-Hour Party People. Like, you have these two guys who basically in like 2002, 2003 made these movies that like crossed over, that were really exciting and full of fucking like piss and vinegar. And then now they're like, we're going to take you to the countryside where a young boy who talks to saints questions how he can do good in the world.
Right. Absolutely. I don't know. Frank Cottrell Boyce basically says no one wanted to make this movie until Danny Boyle got interested and picked up the script, and I don't know, like he probably was attracted to the script because of the writer, less because of the theming or whatever. But he loved the idea of the way he puts it is, it's the most shocking thing I could have done. His favorite filmmaker is Nicholas Roeg. He talks about Nicholas Roeg all the time, and he loves the Nicholas Roeg made The Witches. Like,
sure.
It's like, whoa, he made a kids movie, and like, whoa, this is what that was. Like, this is his version of a kids movie. So I think he was just intrigued by the sheer perversity of him doing a children's movie at that point in his career. And also, as we've mentioned before, Danny Boyle has a religious Irish Catholic mother. I think he loves that sort of element of the story. And he wants to tell it sincerely. We've talked about how he sort of grew up a strict Catholic boy and wanted to be a priest, the classic origin story of many a filmmaker. So they like the idea of the like theatricality and drama of Catholicism and these Gothic tales about saints and how violent they are. And they probably both felt that way when they were kids. They were probably both into those kinds of stories. And so it resonated for him.
This movie is one of those cases that rarely happens now, but weirdly happened like a lot in the 70s, where he writes the script, they make this film, he adapts his own script into a novel. The novel is published before the movie comes out, but is derived from the screenplay, knowing the movie was being made. And then the book becomes pretty popular and wins awards. So this is like a movie that you kind of would believe is based on some pre-existing book. And I'm sure there are a lot of people who have the false memory of, well, I remember reading that book before I saw the movie, so it was based off a book. But it was actually sort of like the love story thing, where it was almost like a reverse marketing tactic for the movie. And the book, I feel like maybe was even better received than the movie was.
Yeah, the book won the Carnegie Medal, which is like the biggest children's book award that exists.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid in Britain, if a book won the Carnegie Medal, I read it, like, because it was sort of like, okay, that's like the best children's book.
It's just kind of wild that that's like ostensibly like a junior novelization of this movie that was just released before as its own thing.
Yeah, no, it is funny. It's kind of a 2001: A Space Odyssey situation.
Yeah,
it was sort of like, I think the book actually came out in Britain before the film. I don't know. Anyway, it's very funny. Another thing that's interesting, Boyle says his dad moved the family to a better neighborhood when he was a kid. This is Boyle talking. My dad was a working class laborer. He was a big man. He worked all his life with his brawn. He worked in a power station at a stove boiler. And he was smart and he knew enough to make sure I didn't follow him. So he, moved them within Manchester to a better neighborhood. So I think the way he puts it is this was kind of a gesture of love to his mother and his father. Like he identifies with that too. It's one of those things. Like, I love Danny Boyle, and Adam, you've talked to him. I've never interviewed him, but it feels like you're like, so why'd you make this movie? He's like, oh, I don't know. I thought it'd be fun to make a kid's movie. And then like 2 minutes later, he's like, so my mother and father moved, and you're like, oh, this
Right.
like clearly is speaking to something very deep in you. It's not just like a bit of a whim for you.
Yeah.
He's a sincere fella, which I like. The original script was set in the 60s, which is crazy.
Oh, that's wild.
And so instead they decided to modernize it to the weird point of fantasy, right? Of like actually setting it in a sort of near future.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very interested in the sort of lower middle class housing estate milieu, which was something he just thinks was not being like represented in British film at all at the time, like that setting.
Yeah. So is the notion that if it had been set in the 60s, the whole sort of like currency conversion element wouldn't have been part of it? It would have just been bag of money?
I assume so, yes.
Yeah.
It would have just been, what if some kids found millions of pounds?
For sure.
In a bag of money. He thought it was too close to Whistle Down the Wind, if you guys know that movie, which is like kids find a criminal in a barn. He's played by Alan Bates. For whatever reason, he thought that the period setting made it feel like Whistle Down the Wind, which is not, I don't think that's a movie that non-Brits know that well.
No, I've never heard of it.
It's not a bad movie. The other thing he considered, which he's talked about a lot, is that he wanted to turn it into a musical and he wishes they had. Like, that's his big regret. He thinks they wouldn't have gotten the money for it, but he wishes they'd had the chutzpah.
He says this constantly because I feel like basically anytime he does an interview and people ask him, you've covered so many different genres, what do you still want to do? He always says, I wish I had done a full out musical. It's like the biggest to do on my list. The closest I came was Millions. I think the movie would have connected with people more if I had done it. He always says, like, we didn't have the courage to commit to that. At different times, he said he wanted Liam Gallagher to write the songs.
Noel Gallagher.
I'm sorry.
Assume,
I'm sorry.
Liam Gallagher doesn't write any songs. I mean, he does write some songs, but they're very simple. No offense to Liam Gallagher.
Maybe he wanted bad songs. Maybe he wanted bad songs in the movie.
Yeah, maybe he wanted like really shitty songs.
Maybe the songs.
I mean, it's a Manchester. It's set in the suburbs of Liverpool, actually, but it's set near Manchester. Like I can see him thinking that. Like, what if we do this sort of Northern Soul movie, right? Where we have like, music by Oasis and stuff. Like, that sounds great, but that also sounds like a movie that costs twice as much money and can't be as kind of like impish and small scale as this thing, right? Like, it would have to be a pretty blown out thing at that point.
Yeah, and I think there's like the Ken Loach element to what he's doing, obviously with the magical realism on top of it. Right.
Yeah.
That, like, I don't know how you square that in a movie that's already like trying to combine a little bit of like kitchen sink with some magical realism and then also having people break into song. That having been said, this feels like a movie where they could announce tomorrow, oh, they're like doing this at New Horizons as a musical.
Right.
Right. And suddenly it's like one of these bizarre musicals that becomes a Tony favorite off a movie that no one's thought about in 20 years. Like on stage, I could absolutely see this story working with songs. As a movie, I find it harder to picture.
Me too.
I think that's fair. Either way, I would probably forgive some of its logic trespasses more if it was a musical. I think it would make more sense as a musical.
I wonder if that's what he's getting at when he says he wishes he had done it. You know, and saying like, I kind of felt like that movie was tonally close to being a musical, but I just didn't have the courage to put the songs in. It's like, maybe that's just the plane of logic he wanted to operate on.
There's something more ecstatic about it. This is already a fantasy film in a way. He's seeing visions. It's set in an unreal moment.
Right.
Like,
that
so, you know,
just
and
telegraphs it to the audience much more clearly.
And it's just funny that he does Sunshine after this, but then he does Slumdog Millionaire, where you're like, once again, it feels like you made kind of like a quarter of a musical. Like, why not just go all the way, buddy? I mean, Yesterday is probably the closest he's actually come to finally being like, I shall make a musical.
Correct. He keeps saying that he's actively developing Miss Saigon, which sounds interesting.
I mean, look, I don't like that show that much, and I don't know that Danny Boyle should be making a movie out of it. But like you say, interesting.
I'd be curious to see what he does. It is funny how much Slumdog feels like him figuring out the way to make this type of movie that connects with people.
He pitched this movie to Pathé, who financed it, as a cross between Trainspotting and Amelie. So if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It kind of does make sense. Like the whimsical visuals.
Yeah. I mean, Amelie, one of those weird examples of like an R-rated children's film. It's like ostensibly a kid's movie for grown-ups.
Right. So Alex Attell, as you said, Griff, the main actor here, he says Kelly MacDonald, Frida Pinto, and this guy are the 3 times he cast someone the second they walked into the audition, right? Like those are the 3 sort of thunderbolt casting decisions he made. He was 8 years old. Apparently there was another kid who was a sort of more professional, better actor, better honed. He doesn't say who, obviously.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Most people, right? Who is like, I found me bag. He's just all hunched over.
He was dwarfing it. No. He walked in with shoes on his knees.
Everyone was like, he's done it again. He told Danny he'd been living as an 8-year-old for an entire year.
For 12 years.
No, he like a lot of people were pushing him to cast what I assume was more of a established kid actor kid. And Danny Boyle was just like, he was so natural. Like he just felt like the lack of profession was good for him. And so that's why he cast him. Whereas the kid he cast as the older brother, Lewis McGibbon, was a professional kid actor. And I think Danny Boyle was like, he can fill out the gaps. Like he'll be the one who can sort of hit his lines and have the timing right and know how movies work. Like if as long as I've got one of them, that's fine.
But also, I mean, the key to this movie is believing that this kid is sort of this guileless. And Alex Attell, none of these sound like line readings. You watch the movie and you kind of can't believe he was able to get a second take out of him, because it just feels like, well, this kid's just saying this shit. And there's also the big factor, which is just this kid has an unbelievable punum.
Yeah.
Like the fact that the poster for this movie is just this kid's damn freckle face, some unknown 8-year-old, and the poster is just him smiling because it's like, that is an interesting looking kid. And for how much the movie's got to be him sort of like looking at things and thinking about them and reacting, he's just got a funny look.
Yeah, it makes it hard to get so mad at him, but I still do.
Man.
Yeah, he's got a sweet little face. I think he's great. Boyle says he'd never really directed kids before, right? Is that true? Like he probably hadn't. There's really not any kids in the earlier movies.
The baby puppet, the Trainspotting, but other than that, yeah.
Sure. So he says, like, at first he was being like very interventionist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Giving lots of specific direction, and the way he puts it, which I like, is like you get your fingerprints all over them. Like, and it feels like what he really just wanted was natural performances, as much as he could get them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like the quote from him is, the best example of that is the scene where they look at the bras on the internet. If I told them what I think about bras as a 40-year-old man on the internet, it gets very complicated. I just let them play it as they wanted to. Like, they're responsible for that scene. Like,
but Boyle's opinions on bras, they are complicated.
Very hot takes. Like, he is not. Yeah, right. Exactly. That's very specific.
I think women should wear them upside down. And you're like, what does that mean, Danny? What's the function that you like that aesthetically?
He says the only time he ever lost his temper was the two kids were in one room. I was in another. They had to come through to the room I was in. They were mucking around. They'd been eating tons of mint chocolate biscuits and were wired. And I lost it. And I was about to go yell at them, and someone stopped him and said, like, relax, they're kids. Like,
wow.
You can't yell at them. But I think he did a great job. I'm trying to think if he ever directed kids again. Not really again. I mean, there's a pivotal kid in Steve Jobs.
Slumdog.
And then Slumdog. No, you're right. Of course, there are little kids in that. Right. Yes, I forgot.
Yes,
I was like, come on.
No.
I was like, Griffin, Dev Patel is a grown
I'm not
man.
condescending to Dev Patel. I'm saying the first chunk of that movie is like
no, you're right.
8-year-olds or whatever. Yeah. Ding dong.
Oh, no.
What? David, what?
There's someone at the door, which I really think we had, successfully gotten people off the scent.
You think
knocking on the door. Yeah.
You thought you were going to get in and out of here quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Ben, get the door.
Okay.
Hello. Hi. How are you doing? How are you feeling today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, okay. I'm a doctor. I got 15 seconds.
Oh, you're in a rush?
Yeah, absolutely. Blood pressure, good. Stick out your tongue.
Yeah.
Ears, eyes.
Sure. Here they are.
Do you feel sick?
I don't know. I've got some stuff I want to work.
Okay, good enough.
Okay, I'll see you
bye.
later.
Slam.
There's nothing worse, Griffin, than what just happened.
That distinct character who just walked in here and wasted our time. And I don't think he gave you any peace of mind.
He didn't, because, you go to these doctor's appointments, you expect to be the center of attention. And doctor seems like they got better things to do and better places to be.
Yes.
Instead of listening to you intently, asking you how you feel, helping you along, they're checking the clock.
That guy had tickets to Fosse's Dancing in his hand. I don't know if you saw that.
He was tapping his way to that
He
matinee.
came in jogging pants.
Yeah.
He never stopped moving. He was clearly like running in place.
Look, on ZocDoc, you're going to find quality doctors who focus on you, listen to you, and prioritize your care. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun.
Take your insurance is a big one, because I have a bad body that is constantly breaking down.
No, it's not so bad.
Yeah, it looks good.
Hey.
What am I talking about? But nothing's worse than when you identify a problem physically, right? And you're like, I want to get this fixed. And you find the right doctor, and they're like, oh, I'm outside of your insurance policy. Who is inside my insurance policy? You call up, they give you bad answer. It's always a hassle. ZocDocs just centralizes all that information.
Yes. Look, when you're not feeling your best, you're just trying to hold it together. Finding great care shouldn't take up all of your energy. That's where ZocDoc comes in. They use your free app. Okay, they got a free app. Millions of users rely on it. You can find the right doctor meets your needs, fits your schedule, book an appointment with a few taps in the app, and start feeling better with ZocDoc. Yeah. Listen.
You're the one who's in a rush. It shouldn't be your doctor.
Exactly.
That silly character who didn't even get a name.
Yeah, we're not naming him.
He might come back and get a name later.
Okay. Go to ZocDoc.com/check and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/check. ZocDoc.com/check.
Ding dong.
No.
Ding dong.
Not answering the door.
David Creek. Hi, I'm sorry. I just forgot to mention my name is Dr. Jeffrey Rush. David, here's another question I had watching this movie. Is James Nesbitt like a much bigger star in the UK than I realize?
Yes, absolutely.
He's like a humongous deal.
I mean, humongous is maybe not, but he was in Cold Feet, which is one of those things that like everyone in Britain knows, but I guess no one in America knows, right? You don't know what Cold Feet is, right?
No, I just think of him as like a great character actor, and I'm always happy when he shows up. And then I was digging around his Wikipedia.
What do you know him from?
Well, like Bloody Sunday, obviously he's the lead in that.
Yes, I mean, obviously that's sort of an ensemble film and like an experiential film, but he is absolutely the lead of it.
Right. And then, was, that's Greengrass's like career maker. But it's like, no, I know him from this. I know him from Waking Ned Divine. I know him from The Hobbit. You know?
Yeah.
He
was one of the hobbits. I mean, one of the dwarves.
Right, as like a supporting guy. And then in the UK, like on TV, he is a leading man, right?
100%. Because I would say in Waking Ned Divine, he's pretty supporting in that too, right? Like, because the old guys are the main guys in that. He was the star of a television show called Cold Feet with Helen Baxendale. And other people you might recognize, like that was like kind of a big, very popular soapy comedy drama. And he was like the sexy leading man in that.
Okay.
As, silly as that might sound to some. And then, he's our TV guy. He's had a long, successful career. He had this like cop show called Murphy's Law. He did Jekyll, which was the Stephen Moffat update on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He's he's always around. He's such a charming guy. I love James Nesbitt. Yeah.
No, I love him. I think it's a pretty great performance. But he's the name in this movie, not that it's being sold on his name.
He is the only name in this movie, I would say, because Daisy Donovan is sort of a somewhat known comedy star at that point. Maybe that's about it. Now she's married to Dan Mazer. I don't know if you knew that. Dan Mazer?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Can I give you my favorite James Nesbitt bit in this movie?
Please.
Definitely.
Because I think, David, you'll have to tell us. These two things seem especially British, or at least stereotypically British. And the Nesbitt one is the moment when he has to come to school because they've stolen money, they think.
Yeah.
And he's taking them out of school. And Anthony, the older brother, is pretending to cry and be all upset about it. And twice Nesbitt is like, you shouldn't steal money, but really don't cry. And then
right.
A minute later, he's like, now let's stop crying. Oh, and also don't steal. It's as if I'm not ready to deal with any emotions. I do not want to face any of these emotions. And really, I'm more horrified that you're crying than I am that you stole money.
It's much harder for him to take that they're crying. I mean, the most heartbreaking and clever shot in this movie is when the kid demands to get in bed with him early on, and he pulls off the sheets and he's been hugging the pillows. Like that shot just like destroys me. And like the pillows to replace his wife in bed for people who haven't seen the movie.
Especially because up until that point in the movie, he's not playing the morning at all. Nesbitt's being so upbeat and happy for the kids, and it doesn't feel like he's hiding anything. You kind of can't believe this guy lost his wife recently.
Yeah, I even think it's like that moment when I do like that other moment he has where they're in the car and everything's loaded up, and he does go back into the house one more time, and you hear in the sound design, the mix, you hear his wife possibly saying something to the kids, but it's also like figuratively, I don't want to live in this grief, but also literally, I don't want to live in this grief. I don't want to live in this space. Yeah. Let's go move somewhere else. I gotta get out of here. The other British thing I had to ask you about, because it happens twice in two different school scenes, the exact same phrase is used. So, David, I can only assume that your posture is perfect, because twice they say, is everyone sitting up nicely? What, kids weren't allowed to slouch at all at assemblies or in the classroom?
I guess. I mean, that feels very old fashioned to me, but I can imagine that being a thing. Keep your back straight. That's very old fashioned to me.
Did you guys in school talk to did you have a talking trash can? Did you do that bit?
Of course. I mean, that was a standard government issue at that point to have a talking trash bin. There's just, which I like, there is, something driving this movie is that these kids don't know how to express how sad they are, which is normal. Like, obviously, they've gone through this thing that's very difficult to process, but that the culture around them is certainly not like, hey, have as much space as you like to talk about your feelings. Like,
right.
That it is kind of like, all right, let's move on. Let's just, no fussing.
Yeah. The other running joke in the film, our mums died and they get whatever they want. Everybody hears that and instantly does just do whatever they have to do to get them out of the room and to not talk about it anymore.
What I like about that, Adam, is the implication is when faced with that, a kid saying, "My mom died," these adults are so terrified of having to console this kid emotionally or get into it that they're like, the easier thing to do is just give them whatever they want.
Yep.
It's kind of funny too that the kid thinks that he got the money, like this logic of like even God feels so bad for him.
Yeah.
That he granted him, you know, all this money. I mean that like as a kid that would make sense, right?
Right. I love that as a kid he has that logic and you're like good kid logic, but then every grown up is like are there a lot of Bible stories about God just giving people money? No, he doesn't do that. Like,
oh my God.
Like, the more you learn about religion, he doesn't really shell out hard.
Nesbitt has some joke about that at one point where he's like, not known for giving money.
That's right.
Known for taking, not for giving.
Yeah, he's always passing around a damn plate. You got to give him more cash. What's he spending it on? Would be funny if that was what they said at church. Like, this money will be put in a bag that will then drop at the feet of a needy child. It's all going to move around. Like, it's
The movie does kind of have some fun at the expense of the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, too, right? That they're totally hypocritical.
Yeah, it does, which I found kind of shocking because, like, Britain doesn't really have a lot of Mormons. Obviously, I know Mormons go on missions, and I'm sure they're there. But Mormons might as well be space aliens to Britain. It's kind of mean to the Mormons. But yes, there is the scene with the Mormons where they take the fall, I guess, for you know, the kids pretending that's where the money came from, right? That's the gambit.
Yeah, I mean, we should, I guess, just say basically, you know, the beginning of this movie sets up this kid and his worldview, them moving to this new community. He likes to build cardboard forts and go on sort of flights of fancy. I mean, this is like a place where Boyle's style really comes, works to the movie's benefit. I think there's certain moments where Boyle overcranks it and the style becomes a little bit self-defeating, where the movie could maybe just take it a little easier. But anytime the film is depicting the boy's imagination, especially that sequence where he's sort of at the very beginning imagining his cardboard fort being filled out with everything, and you're watching like the computer being constructed one piece at a time, and it's all sort of very handcrafted, like almost Michel Gondry-esque. It feels like a pretty good depiction of how a child's imagination works. It doesn't feel overly synthetic or cutesy. You know, all of that I think is really good. And even just the rendering of the saints, I think, of their performances, but also the way he does the halos, I really like.
Mm-hmm.
I like the halos. Yeah, the halos are fun. And yeah, and I like that they're all kind of regular. You know, like the performances are natural.
All of that's really, really good. But so, yeah, basically like 10 minutes into this movie, a bag of money bonks him on the head while he's playing in a cardboard box by the side of train tracks. And it is the central conflict for the rest of the movie. Now, what do you do with the money? He believes it is from God. His brother thinks they should invest in real estate. And all these sort of characters that pop up, like the Mormons, he's starting to test to figure out who is worthy of getting this money. It's this odd little boy going around with like money tucked in his pants.
Very gentle, pay it forward kind of thing, right? Like without any of the preachiness, or the kids just like, do you deserve money? Yeah. Are you in trouble? There's the person selling the Big Issue, which was which I don't know if it still exists. It was like a magazine that homeless people could sell like to make money. That was like, it was like this sort of very 90s British thing.
Oh, that existed in New York in the early 2000s too.
Yeah.
Big News.
Yes, it was called Street News. Street News in New York, I think. Yeah. But like there's that moment with that person, you know, like there's that kind of like sweet kid thing, like where when you're with a kid, say, and you see maybe a homeless person, you're like, let's keep moving. Like, you know, like the kid's the one with the correct questions of like, what's wrong? Can we help? Like, why is that person not sleeping in a house? Like, yeah, right. And the grown-ups are like, don't worry about it. That's not our problem. We're going to keep it moving now. You know, like that weird dichotomy.
Yeah. There's even just like him going up to people and asking, "Are you poor?" Which obviously bites him in the ass when we meet the poor man.
With the right.
But it's so funny because he's not doing a moral test on these people. He's not making them run through some gauntlet of questions to judge whether they're worthy of it. In his mind is just like, do they need the money or not?
Yeah, it's just a reality.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Anyone who does not have the money they want.
And obviously, they're not rich by any means. They live in this, sort of modest circumstance. But that's, now that he has this bag of money, that's beyond him, obviously. That's why, the older brother is like, you don't understand, buddy. We gotta develop this.
We could put this to good use.
Right.
We got to think towards the future. Well, that's the other thing is that, early on when he's talking to these saints, he asks them about his mother. He wants to believe that his mother has achieved sainthood in the afterlife, that she's still there, that she's been recognized. So for this kid, it's like he's playing the long game. He for him, it's a simple calculation of like, you got to give this money to people in need because I need to be doing the saintly thing. These are my heroes. I want to be amongst them. I want to be amongst my mother.
I just want to point out, Griff, this is interesting. This is from Boyle. One about the talking bin. They went to Disneyland Paris. He took his kids there and they had a talking garbage can.
Correct.
And he was delighted by it. There was a guy in the distance who talks through a hidden microphone, Griff. Is this a thing?
Yep. I don't know if it exists in any of the parks anymore. But Matt Gorley, past and future guest, friend of the show, I believe was at one point the talking garbage can in Anaheim.
So that's hilarious. The halos, Griff, were done by a little CGI house called Clear that doesn't exist anymore. But Danny says he likes that they have a delay on them when they move. He said they were initially done without a delay and they looked really bad, but once the delay was built in, that was what made them work. And the other thing about the stop motion, the boy's new house, the thing you mentioned, as you guys already sort of pinpointed, biggest inspiration, Tim Burton. He was like, I wanted to go for like a Tim Burton thing.
Even the score for this movie a lot of times starts to feel Scissorhandsy. There are themes in it.
Yeah, especially at the beginning. That's what really clued me into it more than anything. I mean, yes, the stop motion and CGs, but the score, John Murphy, is that the guy? It just seems like he was deliberately trying to draw on that.
Well, and it was just like such a specific tone that Burton was able to create at this point, or before this point. His like kind of miracle run in the 80s and 90s, where like that's a guy who could quickly table set a world where you would accept anything happening, even though it wasn't a musical. And it's like Boyle is trying to keep one foot of this movie clearly grounded in reality, but is also trying to give himself that latitude, I think, to some degree.
And it's interesting, like he's using Anthony Dodd Mantle again, a cinematographer who he'd just worked with on 28 Days Later, but they're not shooting on digital. They're shooting on film because at that point, he was like, you just couldn't get colors like this on digital. And he wanted the movie to really pop with color.
It's a pretty lush movie. Yeah.
That's how Manchester looks. That's how Manchester looks, right, David?
Colors are just brighter.
I mean, I think what you joke, but I do think he kind of was like, this is often seen as a deadly and boring kind of a place, especially the suburbs of any English sort of town like that. And he wanted it to feel like delight. He wanted it to feel like what a kid would think a place like that is. Like,
I agree.
Right? The town is called Widnes, which is sort of basically in between Liverpool and Manchester. Liverpool and Manchester are sort of like next to each other. And say a Ken Loach movie, Griff or whatever, would probably paint this as kind of a bleak industrial landscape. And he was like, I don't want to do that.
I love the cop.
The cop is great. This movie is very anti-cop in a delightful little way. Like that kind of classic British thing of like, oh, they're no use.
Is the kettle's on, right? He's just like, give me something. Give me something for being here.
He welcomes everyone to the neighborhood, and he's like, you will probably more than likely be burgled. So here's my card when you have to eventually, put in an insurance claim.
But I'm not going to help. We're not going to get anything out of it. Yeah.
And when their home is actually invaded, he like makes the joke of like, you can file a claim and, try to get your money back, but that probably won't happen until next Christmas. And I'm like, dude, don't fucking kick this guy while he's down.
He really sucks. He's, it's
he
just,
does.
there's, a healthy disrespect for that kind of authority. Like at no point in this movie is anyone really like like you're saying, Ben, like, well, that's the government's money. Like no one's actually, there's no moral concern over, taking this bag of money. There's more of a practical concern.
David, I don't know if you skipped over this or if this is even in the dossier or it's coming up later, but that Cottrell Boyce says that his like starting inspiration for this movie was reading an interview with Martin Scorsese where Scorsese talked about as a child the way he thought of the Saints.
Yes, there's a book called The 6 O'Clock Saints by Joan Wyndham, which Scorsese had cited as a reference, as an influence in an interview with Roger Ebert. And basically, thinking of them as these like insane, gory, erotic, kind of mad people was an early influence on the script. Yes, it's cool.
And this kid who's like collecting, like views Saints like they're baseball players or whatever, wants to like carry them around in his pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that cute scene where he's in the classroom and like the teacher's like, so who inspires you? And every kid is just naming a Manchester United player. Yeah. And then he's like, oh, well, Saints inspire me. Like there's this one, St. Catherine, she got executed on a wheel. Like, and the teacher has to immediately be like, all right. It's like all of those stories are horrible. Like there's no Saint story that doesn't involve like death or war, right? Like, or sick people or whatever,
kind of wild that they're like taught to children.
Well,
I think the patron saint of TV is kind of cool.
Who's the patron saint of TV?
She's the one that smokes a big ass bone in the beginning of the movie.
That's right.
Yeah, right.
The first
Saint
one.
Claire, that's right. Yeah, she is cool.
She seems hip.
It would be funny if like she came back today. She's from like the 12th century. She's like, so how do people remember me? And people are like, you're patron saint of television. And she's like, what? And they're like, let me
cool.
show
What's
you.
on?
Like, let me turn it on. You're going to love it. Oh my God. Do you know why she's the patron saint of television? God, Catholicism is
absolutely
so
no idea. Why?
Pope Pius XII, one of the weirder popes of the 20th century, designated her
weird
the patron
pope.
saint.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's the next HBO show.
Weird pope.
He called her the patron saint of television in 1958 on the basis of when she was too ill to attend mass, she had reportedly been able to hear and see television on the wall of her room. What is that? Like that's insane. That doesn't make any sense. It's the 12th century. Like she didn't have TV, whatever.
Did she call it TV? How did they know?
It'd be funny if she did. She was like, I had like CBS. Fox was kind of fuzzy.
Yeah. She couldn't make it to service. She zoomed in. Okay?
Yeah.
That's what you do.
David.
Yeah.
From the bottom of my heart, yes. I want to wish you a very happy National Nutrition Month.
Oh, finally.
I know it's your favorite time of the year.
March.
You love singing your National Nutrition Month carols. You love making National Nutrition Month cookies with your daughter. And more than anything, you love using HelloFresh to make it easy to choose delicious, dietitian-approved meals.
Sure.
You just simply look for the dietitian win tag on their menu choices for meals under 700 calories and with 1/3 less sodium.
Look, HelloFresh has 40 weekly recipes to choose from for all meal occasions, lifestyles, and preferences. You can take your pick from meals like, listen to this, soy glazed salmon with rice, mushroom and chive risotto.
With the cost of groceries going up and up and up, now is the perfect time to get started with HelloFresh. HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping, 25% less expensive than takeout. David, you love cooking.
I love to cook, but I'm busy because I have child.
Yes.
HelloFresh saves time, right?
Yes.
Everything is parceled out exactly as you need it.
David, I heard you and your wife, Forky, complaining the other night about the fact that your daughter eats on a different schedule than you. You have to make dinner twice a night. Once for her, once for you and your wife.
I can't eat dinner at 5:30.
This is the problem. And HelloFresh is helping you make it easier to make dinner twice.
Yeah, and eventually maybe combine the dinners when she gets a little bit older.
Well,
That's our plan.
We'll
but
get there
and
eventually.
HelloFresh can.
I'm just saying that was a personal experience, right?
No,
I shared a personal experience.
I love to just have personal.
We love to share
experiences
personal
and
experiences.
them
And it's actually
advertisements.
It's in red and bold.
And we did. And so now I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
Go to HelloFresh.com/check60 and use code check60 for 60% off plus free shipping. 60% off is a lot.
That's a lot.
Some of these places, they're like, use this code and we'll give you one lousy whap on the nose. No.
We'll give you a gold star sticker.
Yeah, right. Go to HelloFresh.com/check60 and use code check60 for 60% off plus free shipping.
David, can I say something? It's America's #1 meal kit. And Green Chef is now owned by HelloFresh. Green Chef used to advertise on the show in the past.
Maybe. I don't think they ever did.
if applicable.
But I don't think they ever did.
If you want.
No, they did.
Green
Did
Chef,
they?
we
I think
absolutely
like
had.
a couple of times.
Green Chef, we absolutely had on. I don't want
always
to
hit
fucking
it.
make
because he had a character.
Yes.
What was
The
the
Green Chef.
That was,
He
I
did
definitely
not.
did. Slimer made some
they
meals.
did. Green Chef.
So then can I say this?
2018.
Can I
It's a while
say
ago.
this? HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. And Green Chef, a past sponsor of the show, is now owned by HelloFresh with a wide array of meal plans to choose from. There's something for everyone. I love switching between the brands. Our listeners can enjoy both brands at a discount, as you said.
So many percentages off.
HelloFresh.com/check60. Use code check60 for 60% off plus free shipping.
So what else do we want to say about the plot of Millions before we discuss the release of it? Because I feel like we've been all over the place.
The what's her name? Daisy Donovan comes in as a woman who's a representative for, I guess it's not supposed to be UNICEF, but maybe a UNICEF style charity, right?
Sure.
And timed to this whole E-Day thing, the conversion that's supposed to happen, she's trying to get basically the idea of the kids to donate pocket change, whatever leftover money they're not going to convert at the bank, to African villages, to feed them, to give them clean water machines. And they have this talking trash bin played by Matt Gorley, who our main kid's just entranced by, but also sees that she's the one working it. I think that's kind of a cute moment where he notices her with the remote control, and she kind of gives him the look that we're both in on this. Don't ruin the magic for anyone else. But then he puts a fat wad inside this garbage can. He's got like a broccoli wad of cash that he puts in there. They call his dad
Broccoli
in.
wad.
Yeah, it functions as a meet cute between Nesbitt and Donovan, which I think their scenes together are really sweet. But it also gets her involved in this sort of her voice in his ear. Additionally, I do like that once she's aware of the money, she's not the one who is virtuous about it. She's not saying like, well, like I told you in school, you need to donate all of this money to charity. She's like, I would like to go on a vacation.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. At the same time, there was another part of me watching it that was like, he, the father, is so, I understand that he's so irate and upset in this moment that he might not be thinking clearly. But he's just met this woman who he also knows what she does for a living or how they all met. And he has to assume she's a fairly virtuous woman. And he doesn't hesitate to just show this side of him and be like, no, I'm entitled to all this. We're taking the money. He, you know, when you are starting to date someone, you're putting on the best version of yourself. And he doesn't seem to mind at all that she might actually judge him. I actually do think that's maybe a problem with the screenplay a little bit that doesn't allow those people to be more real characters, that he doesn't seem to hesitate for a second and that she doesn't seem to hesitate for a second. They don't have a conversation about it at all.
No, I'm a little surprised that they let her in on it and she buys into it so quickly with no hesitation. I would accept her also. Ben's shaking his head. I accept that she also gets at the point of, look, there are things I could use that money for. It's the speed at which they lay everything out for her, and she's like, well, obviously what we should do. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this movie's about a group of Bens surrounded by one twerpy kid.
I'm pointing at the screen at that point in the movie. I'm like, finally, someone's talking some sense.
I do think you're right, Adam. Like, there's the characters, the adult characters have that kind of 1 foot in fantasy or like kid vision, you know, like which is fine for the tone of the movie. They're the kids are the protagonists, so the adults only have to make so much sense. But the movie might be even sweeter with like 10 more minutes for Nesbitt and Donovan to really like fall in love or whatever, you know, like for it to be maybe even more of a three-hander, whereas Nesbitt is very in and out in the early chunk of the film, which is fine. Like, it's fine. I get it.
I like that the kids lying keeps getting them like gets a second date, you know, because they're hiding the money in the bag that's their props for the play. And that sort of sets up a second date. Like, I don't know. I think that's really fun, especially because the older brother is trying to prevent it from happening.
David, that thing you said about Boyle talking about having to figure out how to direct kids for the first time, that the scene of the school play with the director feels very telling in that context.
Right.
Where the guy is trying to change the innate energy of this kid rather than just accepting like this is what this kid's like.
This is the thing he does. Yeah, right. You're not gonna turn that around.
Yeah. Can we go for annoyed, tired?
That stuff's all very cute. There's the whole sequence where we sort of see what happened with the money. This kind of like fast cut robbery action sort of fantasy sequence, which is very Danny Boyle and very enjoyable, with the football match and all that. And, you know.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere that Danny Boyle pulled the kind of nature of the heist from something in his life, that it was sort of an urban legend in his town growing up. Let me see if I can find this. I think the specifics of the heist and how it plays out were something he added to the script.
That's makes sense. There is sort of a childish story aspect of the way it's related. It's like it's Arsenal versus Newcastle, and then this happened, and then like it does feel like something a kid would make up in a way. But it's devastating for Damien, for the main kid, to learn that the money is stolen. Right, like that is actually like tough for him. He wanted it to be from God.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe my favorite line in the movie where he says, "It isn't the money's fault; it was stolen."
It's very, very kid-like to empathize with something inanimate. Yes.
But everyone's saying like this is bad money, and he's like, it can do good things. The money didn't do anything wrong.
Well, he's a good boy.
He's a good little boy, despite what Ben says.
Yeah.
What about the interstitials? What is going on with this old man and this woman dressed up like Santa's helper? What is going on?
He's like the British Bixby Snyder saying, "I'll convert that for $1."
Essentially, so that's Leslie Phillips, who is like he's in a lot of Carry On movies. You know the Carry On movies, Griffin?
Oh, yes.
The Carry On movie, the Carry On films are for people who don't know, there's dozens of them, these British comedies from the 50s and 60s, which it's always like, you know, a woman's top falls off and then a guy goes like, "Oh no, oh, I say," you know, and all that. His famous catchphrase is "ding dong," I believe, Leslie Phillips. He is better known these days probably as the voice of the Sorting Hat in Harry Potter. But I think the idea is that's like the fake advertising campaign that Britain would roll out for the Euro. They would get some old beloved comedy guy, and because it's Leslie Phillips, they're putting him with a buxom lady because that's what he was famous for. And he's going like, "Oh, the Euro, it's going to be fun and sexy for Britain to use the Euro now." It's just like it's just a weird little joke, I think, about how Britain would deal with the Euro. I like it too.
I think it's a good campaign. Yeah.
He died. Leslie Phillips, by the way, died last year at the age of 98. This movie's almost 20 years old, but Leslie Phillips kept on going for another almost 20 years. Pretty cool. Wow. What else, guys? There's the big Christmas shopping spree after the robbery, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think if we're forgetting anything else major before the finale. So you really hate the finale, Adam. When do you turn on this movie?
Let's dig into it.
Yeah, I turn on the movie pretty much right after the play. I like the scene going to the old house, and he thinks the bad guy is there, and it's really Dad. But once they start rounding up they find the house has been burgled. They then decide to go to the banks. I'm sort of out on, again, I didn't really buy the dynamic and the motivation of all the characters there at that point because of the way she reacts or doesn't react and just is in on it. Even Damien goes from, you can't do it, Dad, you can't do it, Dad, to then all of a sudden he's making up the wee stories at the bank to hurry things along and helping her out, which I can understand, but also feel like, wow, he kind of goes along with the plan a little.
It is a good racket. You have to give him credit.
I
have
do.
to wee is a pretty
it
solid
works,
racket.
But it almost seems like he's so into being genuine and honest, and here he is embracing it for something that he's not fundamentally into. Now, maybe the point is that he knows he has to get the money because the bad guy's expecting the money. So whatever he has to do to get it, whether he wants to do it or not, he'll do it. But where it just falls apart, and this is, you guys can tell me if I'm not giving Danny Boyle the latitude, to use your word earlier, Griffin, that he's looking for or that he needs here. If I'm being too literal, I'm too caught up on the narrative and the structure of it. But that moment where the doorbell rings and there's a line of people outside in the middle of the night around Christmas. I know it was set up earlier in the movie, right? He's sending those checks away in the envelopes, and one of the saints says, "Don't check those boxes. They'll hound you forever." That's the only setup for that. But the idea that in the middle of the night, those people would show up, and it just so throws things off completely. And the idea that Damien, if he was envisioning that, or that's part of the fantasy, then I would get it. But it's not Damien's point of view. It's really happening. Those people are really on his street. His dad has to talk to them. And I find that sort of, I guess, a little too contrived.
And it's sort of, it exists to push him out of the house to get him to the train tracks. Right. Yeah,
exactly. And so I don't buy that. And then I have to say, I do like the moment with the mother, not deliberately, obviously, but it reminded me actually of the end of Field of Dreams a little bit. You know how that whole movie is about his relationship with the dad. And if you build it, he will come. But we think he's talking about Joe Jackson, and everything's been resolved in the movie. But then all of a sudden, right after everything's been resolved, the dad just shows up and reminds you that, oh, actually, it's about father and son, right?
I mean, in Field of Dreams, to me, it's just like a hammer blow that turns me into a puddle of mush.
Obviously,
people make fun of that moment, but I love it so much.
Thank you, David. Thank you. You're in a safe space. Me too. Yes. And here, it's kind of like that, where all of a sudden, oh, this really is all this stuff we're talking about. The saints, you name it, right? What he's going to do. It really is just all about the loss of his mother and looking for her and trying to connect with her and have some closure there. So the fact that we get that reminder, I felt great about that. And so then to tack on to that, the imaginative, let's take a rocket ship to Africa and we're going to play in the water. That's what really bugged me a lot back in 2005. I give it a little bit more leeway this time just because I feel like I was more in tune to the fantastic or the fantasy nature of this film, but there's something that still sits really badly with me about that. I would have never used a term in 2005 like, white savior, and it's not that, because they're not the ones responsible. I don't think we're supposed to believe that they're the ones responsible for bringing the water, but they show up and they get to frolic around in it. There's something that just feels a little exploitative and a little too sweet, as if all of a sudden Boyle has taken you through all this and then he's going to want to really make you believe that he wants to change the world. That Danny Boyle wants you to feel like we're going to all work together to make the world a better place. It felt inauthentic to me.
So two-pronged thing for me. One, I think this is a weirdly difficult movie to resolve. I agree with you that I don't really like the way it wraps anything up, but I also have no idea in my mind how you do it better, because it just starts to stack so many things up on the plate.
Yeah. I don't know obviously the resolution should be him talking to his mother. Like we all, I think, agree on that. Like that feels so
and the
natural.
brother moment too. The brother seeing the mom too. That's closure after they've had their split.
Right.
And they've been on opposite sides of this. So the fact that now they're coming together as a family, as brothers, is important too with the mom.
I guess that's the problem. The movie knows how to resolve itself emotionally, and it executes that well. It does not how to resolve its plot.
Right.
It's totally stuck on how to resolve its plot, which has gotten kind of out of hand.
And it's like, we need to just get him to the train tracks, wanting to get rid of the money. And it does feel like a sort of absurd contrivance that these people show up on Christmas. No one, would do that.
Well, and you're not even mentioning the additional contrivances, which is they all show up on Christmas after he's left his home to go to the other home, but they come back, they see the people there. He thinks it's the poor man, quote unquote, right? Doesn't want to answer the doorbell. It's the line around the block. The cops show up to see what the disturbance is. That gives him the distraction to be able to leave and go to the train tracks. But it also means that when the poor man is now sneaking in through, the cops are already there.
Right.
Because they're investigating what's going on here because they're suspicious of Nesbitt. So it gets him caught perfectly without ever putting the kid in any immediate danger at this final like denouement. But then also things like, why are they like papering their walls with the bills perfectly for anyone to walk in and see? And then what does the cop end up making of all of this?
These all feel like Danny Boyle ideas where he's like, wouldn't it be brilliant if that happened? Like if they, and it's like, yeah, that's fun. And the same thing with the dream sequence in Africa at the end of the movie that feels like with it, wouldn't that be lovely? You sort of like see him imagining how the money would be used and that's it's fine. I don't dislike it as much as you, Adam, but like I do feel like it's kind of just the movie's in search of like a triumphant tag it doesn't need, and it feels a little kind of like basic or head patty or whatever.
Absolutely.
It goes back to the logic part we were saying in the musical. I can almost go with all those people showing up. I can hear the song in my head. It's almost a Jesus Christ Superstar moment where we're hearing all the different people in unison. They're explaining what their cause is and what their need is. And it's this rousing musical moment. But as it plays out in this film, where no matter how fantastical the movie is, this is being played mostly straight. And it's setting up all those things, David, you said that it has to. Wow, does it not work? Wow, does it not work for me?
And especially when you're cross-cutting it with the conversation with the mother, which is explicitly magical, but feels emotionally honest and realistic.
Deeply, absolutely, yes.
Right, versus this other stuff that is presented as reality and feels incredibly over the top. The other thing that I think is interesting, so I was watching Trance. We've recorded that episode already, but there's a special feature on the Trance, like Blu-ray, iTunes extras, that is Danny Boyle doing an overview of his entire career. And he's sort of just like doing speed round on all of his movies. And he talks a lot about how with Slumdog, he was basically trying to correct the sins of his past because he has been living, I think still to this day, with an extreme amount of guilt over the damage that filming the beach caused to that location. Right. That they caused actual physical sort of damage, having to like redress this kind of perfect, idyllic, untouched piece of nature for their own filming, but it also turned it into a tourist attraction. The government has had a really hard time controlling it. It was closed down for a long time.
It's more the lingering damage that they're right. Yeah. The ongoing. Yeah.
Right. He's like, for a movie that most people don't even remember, that movie has like irrevocably fucked up that island, and it still lingers like, almost 25 years later. And he talked a lot about when he did Slumdog, and he was like, I'm going to make a movie. I'm going to go into India. I'm going to film in the actual slums. I'm going to film with actual children. We cannot be invading this space. On the beach, I was trying to make a movie about colonialism, and we ended up doing the exact thing we were trying to make a movie against. And now I try to really think about not just the movies themselves and the message, but the way in which I'm making them functioning in a moral way, that I'm like sort of walking the walk. And a thing I read that was very interesting is that Danny Boyle made a sort of plea to the cast and crew of this movie that there would not be cast and crew rap gifts, that they would not spend the money to make a bunch of cheap T-shirts with Millions 2004 on them to everyone to take home and probably never wear, that they allocated the money that would have been for that to donate to a village in Africa to create one of these clean water machines. And it feels like he was so caught up in that concept that he also decided to make it the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, that's funny. I mean, I can see that. This movie marks a shift for him thematically, right? Beyond just like making a movie for kids. There's just like, I mean, Sunshine is sort of, even Sunshine has an optimistic tinge to it at the end. And then Slumdog and 127 Hours. Yeah, you know.
Oh, especially the end. I think it's one of the things people don't. But yes, this is when he starts wearing his heart on his sleeve and it starts to turn certain people off.
Right. But it does seem to be a huge part of him. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe he does kind of have the burnout of like, I have to stop being this kind of like, you know, sexy, play fast, hard and loose kind of, you know, young filmmaker, and I should be more conscientious or whatever. And that's informing the ending. I don't care. I just don't really care. I care about him talking to his mom. I think that stuff is fine.
Yeah.
I think it's good. You know, I think it's well done. It's sweet. And it totally carries off the movie for me. But yeah, the rest of the stuff I could take or leave.
Yeah, and just having every one of them reveal that they secretly kept some of the money so that it's a little have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And then he doubles down on it again, being like, we all did the thing that we wanted. We got our vacation. We bought the PlayStation 3, this and that. But then also we did the charitable thing. Like, it just feels like he is like 2 or 3 times in a row trying to land on both sides in this ending. But it is whatever. Like, I do like this movie. The ending falls apart for me, but it doesn't totally sour me on it. And I don't know. I like the swing of it.
Yeah, me too.
You know, for these two guys to do something so outside of their wheelhouse that was also pretty out of vogue in general in the industry at the time. I mean, Boyle was talking about, like, you know, he pitches he wants to do a zombie movie. People can understand the idea of doing an art house zombie movie or an inexpensive zombie movie. And he's like, if you go to Fox Searchlight and you say we want to make a kids movie, they don't understand how you're going to compete against Pixar.
Right.
Like, there isn't a thought of there being different scales of family film. And so to make one that's more grounded and lower budget and all of that, it's a thing that people rarely do. You rarely see people going to Sundance with movies that are PG. You know, that independently working outside of the studio system, that's what they're choosing to focus their energy on.
Right. And I said this time around, I definitely appreciated the filmmaking a lot more. You talked about Anthony Dodd Mantle in the cinematography here. There is some real artistry. Of course, and I've been listening to your guys' series, and you've touched on this with Boyle, right? Like, he's never going to be bland. He's always going to make a choice, right? And that's why we like him, and that's why even when the films don't quite work, like this one doesn't quite for me, we still respect it and we still want to talk about it. And there are moments like that shot when Damien early in the film, the first night in the new house, right, leaves his bedroom and we get the over the head shot, which it didn't occur to me until thinking about it more ahead of this, that it's kind of a nice heaven's eye view, maybe the mom sort of looking down on the family, but anybody could have shot that. Oh, Damien is having trouble sleeping. Let's have a shot of him getting out of bed. Then the door opens. Long shot of him going down the hallway. Door opens on the dad. I mean, we all could script or choreograph this moment. And the fact that he found such a graceful way to look at the entire family and move through that house it's really wonderful. And even when he opens the door, to his brother's room, and the lighting is so precise that the triangle of light that comes in from the hallway points perfectly at his brother at the computer. You know, it's like that type of attention to detail that maybe you can miss the first time through, but you see it again and it just all feels right in that way. There's another really nice moment the first day at school when, I mean, there's a lot of great shots in this film, but there's a great shot the first day of school where his brother's kind of like, you're weird, stay over here, don't embarrass me. And he stays there and they just do this long pull back to show the whole expanse of the playground with Damien standing there against the wall. And the separation, the juxtaposition of him motionless alone, but against all these people having so much fun, right? It's just such a lovely shot that captures his mental state at that moment, where I think he can go a little too far, where I think we can get Danny Boyle being like, oh, I got to get out my bag of tricks here. This isn't really adding anything, but I'm going to do something cool, is the moment where they have just come back, I think, or they're about to start looking at apartments. The brother's looking at real estate. And so the shot starts with them walking down the sidewalk and going around a corner. And then the camera pulls back to reveal that's now a photograph of a neighborhood on the glass of the business they're looking at. It's a really clever shot. I've actually never seen, I'm not sure I've seen anything like it. It adds absolutely nothing.
Nothing. It serves no thematic purpose.
It's ingenious.
But that's the Boyle magic. It's just right. Like you say, there's no boring shot. He can't do it. He won't do a boring establishing shot.
No, everything is a choice, and sometimes it is a choice that somehow expresses a thing visually better than you could ever imagine, and sometimes it is just a flourish for the sake of a flourish.
But the other thing is, when you read about how he makes his movies, especially at this point in his career, it's small crews. So it really is, I think, him being like, come on, that'll be fun. You know, like there is this kind of like everyone's in it together to do this inventive stuff. They're not like, oh my God, Danny, like that's going to take all day. Like, what are you thinking?
Like, did we need the video phone part of the movie? Probably not.
It feels like that just feeds into the cutting edge part of the movie.
Yes.
Like the sort of like, oh, it's like the near future. Like everything's changing. Like Britain's going to have the euro, all that stuff.
And then he does a wipe that is like basically a screensaver.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, stylistic, I guess.
He loves that new digital feel.
Pretty dated at this point.
Yeah. Well, whatever. You're dated.
Hey.
I am.
Hey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Box
you heard
office
me.
game.
Well, one thing, as I set up the box office game, this film premiered at TIFF in 2004, and Danny Boyle, I think, in my opinion, kind of wisely was like, so is this going to be a Christmas release? And Pathé decided to kick it to March, and they probably should have released it at Christmas because it wasn't a success anyway. Like, it made 6 million US and about 11 worldwide. Like, I think it did okay on home video, but like the Boyle's quote is, there was a lack of confidence about our ability to compete with the big 3 American movies released at Christmas. I remember thinking they'd be awful, and they were. Actually want to look up America at Christmas. Do you remember what the Christmas movies were that year?
It up. For 2003 or 2004?
So I guess that's like the Polar Express year, but obviously that had been
Polar Express, Elf, Incredibles. I'm like, what comes out on Christmas Day 2004?
It's like Meet the Fockers and Lemony Snicket.
Okay.
And, I guess that's what Spanglish. It isn't the best weekend. I can see what he's saying. National Treasure, though, that's good.
Hey.
Oh, no, but that's been out since Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
right.
I'm sorry. The Christmas
Phantom
Day
of the Opera,
releases,
right.
Fat Albert.
Yeah, it is a bad crop.
Yeah. Those were the 3. It was Fockers, Phantom of the Opera, and Fat Albert were the 3 that came out on Christmas, basically.
Well, nonetheless, this was more of an Easter release. And so let's do the March 11th, 2005 box office Griffin. This film is opening in limited release on 5 screens for $70,000. But number 1 is an animated film for children.
In 2005, was it Meet the Robinsons?
No, it is not a Disney film. It is from Fox.
It's a Fox movie. Is it Ice Age 2?
No, but it is from
it's
the
robots. It's
director of
robots.
Ice
It's
Age.
robots.
It
It's
is
robots. It's robots. It's robots.
Which I've never seen. Robots. Have you seen Robots?
It's William Joyce. So the whole the design of that movie is incredible. And I remember the script being incomprehensible despite being written by David Lindsay-Abaire.
That is who it was written by. You were correct. Along with Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel, the icons.
Yes. But like a movie with like a great The Art of Robots book, probably. It works on that level. Have you ever seen that movie, Adam? Have you have not had to go through robots with any of the children?
No, we have not seen it. And obviously we chose to talk about Millions that week instead of talking about robots.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you did not talk about robots.
Nope.
just feels like a movie lost to time. Like could be on Disney Plus, isn't.
Is
you
not.
know, like no one wants to think about
Millions is on Disney Plus. Disney has claimed Millions as one of their own. Robots, absolutely not.
So number 2 is a family film, Griff, that was number 1 the week before, and it stars one of your favorites.
It stars one of my favorites. Is it a Steve Martin film?
No, this guy doesn't do a family film usually.
Nope. I know what it is. It is arguably my least favorite film of his. It is The Pacifier.
It's The Pacifier.
Vin Diesel's The Pacifier.
With Vin Diesel and Lauren Graham. He's an Navy SEAL who has to be a babysitter.
SEAL. Yeah, there's a duck in it.
Okay. I've never seen it. It was an unambiguous hit. That is the thing people forget.
Huge hit.
It was kind of the moment of like, okay, Vin Diesel must be for real. He's, getting that over the line,
Well, then The Rock follows his lead and does like Tooth Fairy and The Game Plan. He does his run of doing the family, now I'm with a bunch of little kids movies. The Pacifier, bigger than any of The Rock's attempts to do that. The Pacifier was wildly successful. It is not a good movie.
Speaking of The Rock, number 3, Adam already invoked it. It was the movie he talked about on the prior episode of his podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It is a crime comedy ensemble picture.
Yes, Be Cool.
And a sequel. It is Be Cool. F. Gary Gray's Be Cool, which I remember being god awful.
It is god awful, and it's The Rock is in that, right? Because
The Rock is
sure is. He's one of the more interesting parts of it. Yeah,
that was the last time maybe The Rock was ever interesting on screen. In fact,
I think it's that and Pain and Gain. Although I know Pain and Gain is also a very contentious movie in the history of Filmspotting.
Divisive.
I love that.
Josh is a big fan. He's also a much bigger fan of Millions than I am. Damien was on his top 5 Danny Boyle characters.
Wow. When we have Josh on sometime in the future, we will get a speed round on his Millions opinions.
You know what else he likes, guys? Sorry. He's also a big fan of A Life Less Ordinary. He's the one.
Okay, well, we might try him at The Hague for that.
A lot of people like that movie, Griff. Like our Reddit was very
surprised.
Like, oh, what a charmer. And I can't get there with A Life Less.
No, you guys were right.
I hate it.
You were all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
No.
So number 3 is Be Cool, which was, kind of a flop, made 55 million. Number 4 is, I saw this film in theaters. It is an action picture starring an action star. It's very basic film. I remember that the opening credits were the best
Bruce
thing
Willis
about
in
it.
Hostage?
That's correct. I saw it in theaters, just don't remember anything else about it. Kevin Pollak might be the bad guy.
I thought Ben Foster was the bad guy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Ben Foster's the bad guy. Kevin Pollak might be the good guy, but then maybe turns out to be bad.
Yeah.
One of those classic, like, he's your friend, and then he's like, hey, I'm sorry. They offered me a lot of money. I'm Kevin Pollak. I have a flat cap on.
It's just business. It's business.
Yeah,
not
it's
personal.
just business, but I know we're friends. I went to your daughter's wedding. I understand, but,
Ben Foster, like deep into his run of reading a script and going, my take on this character is shaving my head and acting like I'm on crystal meth. He did that about 10 times. I feel like
interesting choice for you, Ben. Okay, very good.
I don't know.
I'm
I'm seeing this sort of explosive. You describing that as generic as your description sounded, I felt like there was only one movie it could be, because this was that era where even though Bruce Willis movies weren't as big as they were, they obviously were more legitimate than like the sad sort of run into
they would get
diminished
a big,
states.
wide release.
Right.
This movie opened to $10 million and made 35. It did not do well.
I just remember that one coming out and going like, why did he sign on to this? The pitch was, what if there was a hostage?
Pretty much. Yeah,
There's like no
taken
hook
hostage.
Here? Yeah.
It's not really a hook. I don't know. And the director is not like a well-known director. So yeah, I don't know. Number 5, Griffin, is a big hit of the early winter, spring, whatever. It's been out for a month plus. It's a romantic comedy.
It's a romantic comedy in
Huge
2005. One huge star?
One huge star. This star is this movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about less a movie and more a movement. You're talking about the one name that is The Cure for the Common Man?
Sure, yes. He was the cure for the common man, and his name was...
It's Hitch.
And he would tell you things like, don't offer to buy your girlfriend a diet soda, you buffoon. That'll be $10,000, please.
Yes.
Or whatever it is he does.
Look, expensive, but he's worth it. The results. Yeah, I mean, you talk about Pacifier being one of those moments where people threw up their hands. I mean, the moment pretty much ends right after Pacifier, but like, if Vin could make this a hit, then I guess this guy is more powerful than we thought. Right. Hitch becoming that level of blockbuster was truly the moment where I think everyone went, I guess Will Smith literally in anything, in any genre, at any time of year works.
I have long contended that film is now, there's just a lot of fake nostalgia for that movie. It's not a very good movie, but some people stick up for Hitch, including maybe one Griffin Newman.
Is it a better, let's put it this way. Would Hitch have aged better as a Best Picture winner than Crash? This is the question I throw out. You're saying it doesn't age well,
unambiguously.
Unambiguously.
Yes. I mean, obviously, you're putting it up against... I mean, Crash is the biggest fall guy possible, but yes.
Of course.
Yes.
If Hitch won Best Picture, it would not be like one of the most embarrassing Best Picture winners.
If Hitch had beaten Brokeback Mountain to Best Picture...
Okay,
how dare you, Griff?
People would be angry.
I do think people might hold a grudge against it.
Remember when they gave it to Hitch?
Yeah, they would that, imagine Jack Nicholson going, Hitch? Like, that was...
Andy Tennant won Best Director for Hitch?
Some other films in the top 10 that week. $1 Million Baby, which is on its post-Best Picture win run to $100 million. Diary of a Mad Black Woman, which had come out 3 weeks earlier and shocked everyone, and begins the
first Tyler Perry movie,
Empire. Yep. The wildly underrated Constantine that isn't getting a sequel. Like
they're like now tripling down on like, we swear to God we're doing it. Yeah.
Right. Man of the House, the Tommy Lee Jones, Christina Milian two-hander. I don't know why those guys haven't worked together again.
Okay, Adam, you texted me about this recently.
Oh, about Man of the House?
Was there a misunderstanding? Because you were getting mad at me for defending Man of the House, the Chevy Chase, Jonathan Taylor Jonathan Taylor Thomas comedy. Were you confusing it with this, or do you hate that movie as much as this one?
I've actually never seen either. I was more just aghast at your ability to pull these titles and to and to sometimes say positive things about these movies that I've always assumed were just awful.
I have not seen this film.
Oh, I haven't either.
Yes.
Your exact text, Adam, was "Man of the House, come the fuck on."
I couldn't believe you pulled that.
Well, got a broken brain.
Apparently Ann Archer is in this movie. I just remember that being one of those releases where it was kind of like, well, what? Like, this isn't helping anybody. Tommy Lee Jones, he has more dignity than this. He doesn't need to be the man of the house.
No, also one of those movies where you're like, was this shot in 96 and it's just sat on it like didn't feel like a 2005 movie.
Tommy Lee Jones, cheerleaders. Like I'm supposed to be like, oh, wow, what a combination. I assume he does rock the house though, of course, Griffin.
Yes, well, that's why they called it that, yeah.
Right. Number 10 at the box office is Cursed, the Wes Craven, the much delayed Wes Craven werewolf horror comedy.
Yes. Eisenberg Ricci.
Which I've never seen. I've never seen it. And I was hyped for it, I remember. And then the reviews were so universally despondent that I
think fairly disowned, because it was also Kevin Williamson and Craven working together.
It was.
For the
there was
first
excitement
time.
about it. But everyone swore off of it. But anyway.
There's apparently still an outcry to release the Craven cut. Hashtag.
Why not?
Yeah.
Do it. What do I care? Yeah, release the Craven cut. We'll do Craven
cut
one day. I don't know. Maybe. The film got good reviews. I do think it's not a cult classic by any means, but it's sort of like a well-liked family, rental like that. Maybe got to that status, but it is just a funny little oddity in between these two hyper dark sci-fi films that he made.
Especially you're scrolling across Disney Plus where so much of what's on there next to Millions is either so humongous and bombastic and like overexposed, or like weird, non-existent live-action Disney curios, like Man of the House, that no one but me find any nostalgia for. Like, this is sort of an odd outlier, and it is a charming movie for its faults.
Agree. Millions. We did it. We talked about it.
We did it. We talked about Millions. Adam, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure. People who should listen to Filmspotting who don't already. It's a real comfort food podcast for me. I find you guys very relaxing, and I hope that doesn't sound backhanded in any way. But it was a thing I found so funny listening to the second episode for the first time. Is on that at the beginning of the Cinecast, you maybe talk even faster than I do. And I think of you now as someone who has settled so well into like such a professional broadcaster, like public radio voice. You have like very specific rhythms.
That is something that has changed. That was one of the things that horrified me, besides the fact that I felt like I did not give my much smarter co-host, Sam, any room to talk. It was exasperating. It felt like I was talking so fast. I don't know what the race was. I don't know if it was that I was trying to make the show quicker for our listeners or what, but I was just talking so fast about this movie, and it did make me realize how much I've settled into something maybe a little bit more comfortable in terms of my pace.
Yes. I highly recommend listening to current episodes of Filmspotting, and then maybe when you're done, go back to episode 2.
or not. You don't ever need to listen to those.
It would be quite a project if someone was like, I'm listening to every damn episode. I'm firing it up. I'm doing it all.
It happens. It blows my mind. But some people, they get into the show. I'm sure they do it with your show too, right? But they hear it and they go back to the beginning. They go back and they want to hear everything in order. It's crazy.
They do it with our show, and I get it, and I do it with new shows that I discover, but 18 years or it's just a lot of show.
Well, so your show is like usually tied to new releases, so it's truly just like time traveling back to like what was the thing. Be Cool was the talk of the town in April 2005.
I know. We actually felt so bad about it. Sam, I remember having a conversation at the time where it's like, now this is Be Cool, but we were saying, what should our first episode be? And we knew that coming out in a month or two was Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, yeah.
And so I remember posing to Sam, like, should we actually wait? Should we make our first episode be at least a movie people maybe want to hear people talk about and are excited about it? And Sam was smart enough to just say, no, we should just start. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
let's
get your sea legs.
Let's get it go. Right. And so we did. And I think that it ended up being episode 14 or something like that. He was really right, because if we hadn't had that leeway, it would have been a struggle.
Adam, sorry to correct you. It ended up being episode 3. Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
There's no way. Was it?
Apologies. No, let's make a bad Star Wars joke.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. I feel so bad. I missed the joke.
It was bad.
I was thinking, I remember we talked about Melinda and Melinda on week 3.
Well,
so how dare you, Griffin?
She's comedy and drama.
Yeah. And if you had done Revenge of the Sith, if your first episode ever had been you shitting on Revenge of the Sith, I don't think Josh ever would have agreed to co-host Filmspotting.
I actually loved Revenge of the Sith.
Really?
I loved it in 05.
Wow.
I think I might have given it like 5 stars. So maybe at this point,
well, look,
I should go.
These are reasons to dig through the Filmspotting archive.
There you go.
And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. No, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media and helping to produce this show. Thank you to Alex Barron, AJ McKeon for our editing, Leigh Montgomery for our theme song, Joe Bowen, Pat Reynolds for our artwork, and JJ Birch for throwing a duffel bag off of a moving train filled with notes about Danny Boyle's Millions. His dossiers have gotten about as heavy as a duffel bag full of $1 million.
Yes. We love him.
Yes, we do. Tune in next week for Sunshine.
Yeah.
Another wild swerve, one of our shared favorite
faves.
movies, and a movie we've been waiting to talk about since we started this show 8 years ago.
Legit.
You can go to blankcheckpod.com for links to some real nerdy shit, including our Patreon, Blank Check special features, where we do franchise commentaries and all sorts of other bonus things like the Olympic ceremony. And 28 weeks later will both be happening over there.
Yep.
Sunshine, no guest. We're calling it right now for you dang ass freaks.
Nope.
Because David and I just need to vibe out on this one.
I didn't realize this movie was a thing for you guys. Now I'm so excited.
Humongous.
Huge for me.
Okay.
Humongous. Like, before we even had the miniseries idea, we were like, we should just do a Sunshine episode on its own. When we were just a Star Wars podcast, we were like, we should just talk about Sunshine one week. So get ready for what will be the most important episode in the history of podcasting.
It'll be 29 minutes long, probably, or something. Right?
Yeah, a quick 29. No, we're going to keep that one
as
short.
podcasts should.
Yeah. And as always, if Ben had found the bag of money for millions, it would have ended with him living on an island that he owns.
100%.
Okay.
I thought you said you had your quote.
I did. I'm second guessing it, but I'm going to do this.
Okay. Just do it. And then if we hate it, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
And we'll tell you. We won't.
Okay.
We won't spare your feelings.
Ready? Ben?
Yeah.
I want you to place that at the end of the episode in anticipation for what I'm about to do, because I think there's going to be some befuddlement. Okay?
I can't wait to hear you do a Minion voice.
I'm not doing that. This isn't Minions. I hope you didn't watch Minions by accident.
What?
Okay. And that's at the end of the episode. Ready?